Hello and welcome to episode 69 of The Imperial Truth. As ever, I'm Greg, and with me is Neil.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Neil. And this episode, before we get into anything else, let's do the sponsors. You still have time, although you probably won't actually. Well, you might have a day if you listen to this on release day to get your pre-order in for Dark Millennium at Element Games.
Yes.
I've been lucky enough to be sent a copy by Games Workshop, so I have been playing and painting. Some people might have seen my toy soldiers. I will get into that a little bit later. But, go through them and get your, still say if you're doing it, it's £71, I think.
Yes, yeah, no, I ordered mine. I did mine through Element.
I've ordered another one. So,
have you?
Yeah, to split the Primaris. I've got a friend collecting a Death Guard, so he's going to have all them. Well, actually, yeah, he's buying that one, so it's all good. And we split that between us. We got a rule book each, which is handy. And
yeah, definitely.
All that other usual goodness, and including you can now go to there, and along the top it says events, and you can go there and buy a ticket to First Blood, which was a title I chose before Games Workshop chose to use First Blood as their intro into 40k on Warhammer community and videos. But there we go. So, yep, we're running I think at the moment it's a 60-player Heresy event, much like I've run the other ones, lots of narrative, and it's all going to take place in that Mal Rain system, and then that Mal Rain system is going to be utilised for all my non-London Heresy events until it's completely decided, basically. So, yeah, that's cool.
So it's ongoing narrative.
Yep, and that's all. That's at Element Games. Naturally, that's why it's on the tickets are available on their site. First weekend of September, so you can start booking. There's a few tickets gone already, which is cool to see. There is an event page on Facebook, and I will link to it in the show notes.
It's also good to mention, obviously, that Element also do a good variety of events up at their centre, because they've just finished the David Soper painting masterclass, and I've seen a few. He did a write up of it, and I've seen a few people show their work, and I tell you what, it looks very, very good. And some of the work that people have come away with, you look at it, you know it's that David Soper style, and you look at it and you do think, wow, they've really cracked something on that course. You know, they've really worked something out. So if he does hold any more of those, or they do other events, keep an eye out for those, definitely. Yeah,
absolutely. The other thing to mention is I know sometimes it's hard to remember to go through our website for supporting the podcast. So what I'm actually doing now is I've realised quite stupidly that I can actually post direct links with the code in that basically says you've come from the Imperial Truth. So if I put a link up on Facebook now or on Twitter, that link in itself will actually say you come via the podcast. And I will what I'll try and do is in the notes each time is put like the relevant link up to the section. So, yep, you can still go to the imperialtruth.com, click on the banner and go through, or you can click on the links that are associated. Basically, they have a question mark and then a series of numbers at the end, and that's our ID number, as it were. So if you don't remember to do that, because I don't remember, I'm putting those links up. So that's cool.
Oh, excellent.
That's awesome. And then Miles.
Yeah, Lil Legend Studios. Now, do you know what? He's been cracking out some good work recently on his Instagram. He's still doing all the great work within his commission painting and covering everything you need, whether it be an army, an individual model, or whatever you really want. But he's also obviously very big on his tuition as well. So if you fancy learning some new techniques or finding out, you know, if an airbrush is a bit of a foreign object to you and you want to learn how to use it properly, then definitely give him a call and see if you can hook up with some one-to-one tuition.
Yeah, and even more so than that now is you can go to his Patreon. So he launched a Patreon account, and there are various levels on that, from getting a tutorial, a written tutorial, I think it is, every month. I've only looked at it briefly. I've subscribed $1 for him. but it goes up to levels where you get a painting lesson each month, and then higher levels where you actually get like critical feedback, detailed critical feedback. And it shows you how well thought of he is, not just for his talent, but for the guy, because he smashed his first target, I think within a day and a half. So it's becoming part of his job now is Patreon, which is a really sensible, good way of doing it. And, cool. All power to the fella. So
I've seen a few painters on Patreon, actually. A few people like putting stuff up there, but I've always thought to myself, it must be quite a tie to be creating that sort of content where people are paying for it. So more power to him.
It depends how he does. Miles has been quite clever. I think the levels where he does a lesson are around the price of the lessons he charged.
Oh, okay.
So there's no loss there. There's no extra effort for less money. And then there are video tutorials. But again, when you're guaranteed, I don't know, I haven't been a commission painter, and I'm sure Miles got plenty of work in, but I reckon there were times when he thought, as anyone in that kind of industry where you're relying on people to come to you, any of those kind of industries, there must be times when you think, I've got nothing on, or not enough on over this period. Yes. And what Patreon does is provide a level of security. And that is only a level because people can drop their money at any time. So if you don't follow through with what you're doing, then your money will drop. And in fact, that's what's happened to this show, is I've not supported Patreon enough, and people quite fairly have reduced the amounts, and it's actually given me a bit of a kick to go, you know what, I'm going to sort that out. But yeah, Miles has got a good solid base there, and a really good resource for people if they want to jump on it. So go and check that out. Search for Miles on Patreon. I'll try and put the links in the show notes anyway. Or go and find, if you go and find him on Facebook or Twitter, I'm sure he'll tell you about it as well.
I'm sure he will.
Excellent. So in fact, I will get onto that. If you are a Patreon supporter, then I put an email out to you about the shirts, because Patreon supporters at the moment do get a certain amount off merchandise. A certain amount of merchandise, I can't do it on everything because I'll be paying people to be paying Patreon, so that wouldn't work. So if you are a member of Patreon, please go and look at that, and I will be reinvigorating that. Additionally, very soon, should have the first episode of my new podcast out, which is going to be Fanatic Podcast. You can find it on Twitter, and it'll be on iTunes and everything like that. If not, when this show's out, then very soon afterwards should have the first little mini intro show, which will only be a couple of minutes long, just to get that feed going. But in Fanatic, basically, I'm gonna try and look at everything that's not Heresy that GW do, because I'm very aware that we do sidle on to other topics on this show. Maybe try and cut that back a bit and give it its own place. So, yeah.
So does that mean we're not allowed to ramble anymore?
Oh, we'll always ramble. I'll get you on there to ramble instead. It'll be fine. And then
every so often it'll be like, let's cut this and add that to a different podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's with a few things I've had going on over a few months, I've been caught up with stuff. So I'm going to restructure Patreon to be supporting me podcasting, as it were. Because, for all that Neil's on the show, I do all the legwork, don't I?
I'm a very lazy podcaster, mate.
Yeah, you've got quite a good job in this one. He comes on and chats, so it's he does. I
do the hard bit, talking to you. That's the difficult bit.
Putting up with me. To be fair, you do some research, but all the technical side of it, which is why it's the level it is me. So the Patreon will be restructured. And people can go and look at that, and I will follow through with it this time because there are reasons to do so. So apologies for those people, and if you have been, there's a couple of specific people who supported me for a while who dropped off quite recently. If you want to get in contact with me, because I can check it all out, what you did, then get in contact with me, because I feel like I should be offering some of those things to those people as well, because I haven't run it very well. I'm going to hold my hands up and say that something I neglected. And when I look at Age of Darkness have got theirs going, the Forgotten Legion have got theirs going, and they're much smoother than mine. and they follow through on what they do, I believe. So I've got to kick myself in the rear for that. And some people don't mind, some people do mind, that's fair enough. But if I'm offering it, I should do it.
Definitely.
But yeah, that's been taking up time with organising events. So, as I said, we've got First Blood at Element Games. We also have Blood and Glory. This is the first weekend in November. Now, this is... Blood and Glory was a Age of Sigmar, a Warhammer Fantasy originally, event, which was created when Ben Curry went to Adepticon and came back with the desire to make a gaming convention in the UK that was Adepticon style. He received, actual negative kind of responses from 40k and from various other game systems, to the point where he just went, okay, not happening, let's do Warhammer. So for a few years it's been Warhammer only. This year he's taken the step of making it a convention, and it's going to be, I think it's, don't quote me on this, but I think it's going to be Games Workshop only at the moment. So there is already tickets available for Age of Sigmar, and for 40k there are going to be Age of Sigmar narrative events. There's going to be some smaller side events. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some Blood Bowl. I'm not 100% sure if that's happening or not. But there is certainly going to be a Horus Heresy narrative event. So I've also been trying to get things sorted for that, because 1st November is also not that far away, really. So
yeah, come around really quick.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get show notes up, because tickets should be on sale fairly soon. It's going to take place in Derby, so nice and central. And the venue is the Roundhouse in Derby, which, for those who don't know, which will be most people, is a large building which was used as a turntable for trains. So think of Thomas the Tank Engine, that big turntable, yeah, just a big building to house that. So apparently it's a fantastic venue. He actually did a video on it as well. There's a Facebook group for Blood and Glory. You can go there. I'll try and remember to put the show notes, that link in the show notes as well. And I'm sure I'll be spamming, as soon as the tickets become available, I'll be spamming that. But Ben's done a video from the venue and a podcast about it, so hopefully we'll get him on to chat about that, and I might appear on his show. I've got to talk to him about that to help push it. But it'll be another big Heresy event. And Derby, for those who aren't fully aware, is 15 miles or so from Nottingham. If that.
Oh, brilliant. So you can do a bit of a combined trip.
Yeah, and there's still got to flesh out all the details yet. There is certainly going to be a main event of probably five games to, however many thousands of points. But there is potential to have smaller events alongside it. That fully depends on what kind of support I get, because at the moment it's just me. So, yeah, we're trying to do that. So, I've got to talk to some people to help out with that, which is slightly harder than things, because it's, running events, particularly when they're not local to you, is not always the easiest thing. But hopefully it should be really cool. And Games Workshop are going to be at that event with the cameras and various other things, I think. So, they've announced that they're going to be there, so it should be really cool.
Brilliant.
And there should be decent numbers for that as well, so that'll be groovy.
Excellent, sounds exciting.
Yes, I've just got to write lots of rules packs and things. It's all good, never stops.
Is it going to be copy and paste?
No, actually, no. I'll give you a little clue. For Blood and Glory, I spent an hour or two at work the other day writing out possible. So Blood and Glory is going to be like a dynamic effect from round 1 to round 2 as to whether the traitors or loyalists win, and that will cascade through the whole weekend. So if the loyalists win all the first 4 rounds, don't expect the traitors to be able to win that event. Right? But what they might be able to do is lessen their loss, which then leads into another event. So yeah, if it's touch and go, potentially a side can win it, or if a side just steamrollers, fine. But yeah, there's going to be storytelling, and I've written out, I'm going to have to write like 5 or 6 or 7 different scenarios depending on what's going on with that. So hopefully that's the way we're going to bring story to that one. But hopefully it works. Touch wood. But I can actually have the ability and the skill to do it. But I thought
it's a tricky thing, isn't it? Because I was listening to some other people talk about events and bits and pieces going on, and it does seem that, you know, some people do like this sort of story arc to be going on at these narrative events where every game that is played has an effect somehow. But it's a very hard thing to get right and to do, I think. Because you need regularly to know, you know, who's going to be playing who, and, you know, what's going to be in each game, all that sort of stuff. And it's not that easy to say, right, well, because you won that game, that means you now play so and so, and this is the effect it's had on this table, etc.
Yeah, I think particularly the larger numbers you get, once you go past like 20 players, it becomes very hard for individual stories to emerge. So this one is very much about the feel of the whole battle, you know, whilst maybe trying to fit a little bit of storytelling in there as well. We were helped at London Heresy by some of the armies being particularly story driven.
Yes.
Which allows you to then pick them out really easily, particularly Ben's Mechanicum and Custodes. So that does help in that. But with numbers of 40 or 50 players, you just can't do it. There are also potential issues with the building. So the roundhouse is actually quite an open building. Now, depending on our setup, it might be hard to actually physically talk to the players for a long period of time because of all the other sound going on in the building or me affecting those. So
yeah, because it was quite tricky even in the London Heresy, wasn't it? Trying to get your voice across a small group of huddled people. It sounded quite strained at times.
Yeah, so, you know, these are things you've got to take into account when you're considering this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I won't know if it works until I try it. Now, I'm sure it will work to an extent. To what extent? Who knows? And I'm sure there'll be teething problems with it, but I wanted to do something different to what I've done before for that event. So it's a good test of the style. I say if this was 20 players or 15 players, 16 players, it would be quite easy to do that. And in fact, at that point, if you've got two people helping you, you can be very individual on almost all the games. But and there's something to be said for that, and that is why I'm contemplating for Blood and Glory having these other side events, which are a bit smaller, or maybe just allow people to turn up for one day. So, that kind of thing.
Okay,
yeah, but we'll see. I've got to talk to Ben because this has been, it's something that's been on the cards for a while, but has only really taken hold pretty recently. And Ben's really kind of put his flag in the ground to hire this place out for 3 years running. All right. So there's a commitment there financially to do it and make it work, and that is always a good thing. I think when someone's prepared to put their money on the line like that, then they're going to work themselves off, to make sure that they don't waste it.
Oh, of course, yeah, definitely. If anyone's willing to commit their own, hard-earned cash to get something big off the ground like that, more power to them, because it's not, it's daunting if nothing else.
Yeah, and that, to be honest, with the London Heresy, that was the thing that really sold me to Zach and the guys. Was we were talking about it, and I was and ahhing for various reasons, various things I just wasn't 100% sure on, having not known them and not been to their previous events. When they kind of told me about the financial kind of burden they'd taken on themselves. Terrain, things like that, all that kind of stuff. It was like, well, these guys are serious. These guys are not going to let this fail, which is really cool. Yeah, really cool. My events, it makes it sound bad. It's not bad, but my events at Element, that's financially so much more secure than these events.
Well, yeah, because in some ways, when you group up with a company like Element, a lot of the strain is borne by them, isn't it? With the boards, the tables, all that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have to, I pay them a fee for people to turn up and play, but that outlay is taken as it comes. I don't have to foot it up front. So yeah, it's cool. It's good to see more events. Hopefully it should be good fun.
Yeah, sounds it.
All right. So have you actually been painting now?
I sort of have, yes. After Golden Demon, a little bit slow to get going, as I often find with these things. But I am painting at the moment. I've got Korax out. I feel a bit more reinvigorated now that I've got the Summoner done and out of the way. And yeah, it's feeling good to be back at the table. I'm enjoying it. And I'm hoping in the next week or so it all starts to fall into place again, and I can start getting it all done for Jeff.
Yeah, awesome. That's really cool.
How about you? What have you been up to?
I've been painting Primaris Marines, which isn't Heresy, but it is painting. What was really interesting, so I play Age of Sigmar and I play Horus Heresy, and I want to get back into 40k, and I've sold some of my 40k stuff, and I re-undercoated, so I haven't actually got a playable 40k army until they release the new Imperial Armour book for making the Mechanicum work in 40k. So I haven't got a playable 40k army, so I was like, cool, I'll do Primaris Marines. I don't want to spend a lot of time painting them. Awesome. Spray them silver, shoulder pads, and if you follow my Twitter, you've seen the pictures. Simple but works system. But all the time I was like, I don't know if I like it. And there's nothing wrong with the colour system, scheme I've chosen. I actually think it works quite well. I realised halfway through, like, starting the batch painting, that they don't feel finished. Because
you feel like you got a stage miss there somewhere, or
no,
you feel like you need an extra bit?
The idea is not to paint these to the best of my ability. The idea is to paint these quickly. Unfortunately, that means when I look at the models, I sit there and think, well, that could be better. That could be better. And actually, having got halfway through, I'm like, you know what? It's not working. And also, the other thing is playing the game. For those who don't know, haven't seen any of 8th edition, you can mix your Primaris with your normal Space Marines, quite easily. And some of the characters are very much support characters. So, 2 of my characters in the first game I played did nothing except boost other units, and they were very good at doing that. But because the Primaris stat lines are that much better than a normal Space Marine stat line, it's only a little bit, but it is a bit, they are worth more points. But they are having exactly the same effect as a normal Space Marine captain would. So the captain to the captain, and the other bits and pieces. And I was like, you know what? I'm not playing this game to be full on competitive, but I know some of my mates will be, so I'll want to have something a little bit. I'm like, I won't use that guy. I'll use my Space Wolf guy, who's in power armor and is, normal and is 30 points cheaper, almost a third of the points, half the points. So I'll use him instead. And I was like, which means he then has to really fit in with my Space Wolves. Okay, right, I'm just going to have to paint them as Space Wolves, and it will take me longer and whatever, but I will do it. So I actually just stopped painting them, and I've gone back to doing my Mechanicum.
So you're gone back to I thought you were going to say you've sort of redone them all in the quartered scheme. But, okay.
No, as I say, I'm still trying to get the Mechanicum done for this this thing I'm doing. So, yeah, I went back and thought, you know what, I've had a week and a half of trying to paint these Primaris and doing bits and pieces. No, let's crack on with the Mechanicum. And, got a load of undercoating done today and cracking on with that. But, yeah, the Primaris are there. They will get painted. But, it was an interesting vehicle to see if I could just churn something out. And unfortunately, I'm a slow painter who doesn't like the idea of just trying to churn an army out.
The funny thing is, I know it's probably a different degree, but that's exactly what the problem I have when I try and paint an army. I start off with the best intention of, right, I'm just going to keep it quick, simple, just get it done. Let's get, so many Marines done by this point and so many vehicles done by this point. And as I progress through, I try because I look at it and I'm not happy with how I've painted it, I keep trying to push the stand up. But that, of course, takes more time. Yeah. And then you get into this vicious circle. By near the end of it, you're almost trying to paint to your full standard again. But that's just massively slowing everything down. So I feel your pain on that one. It can be very difficult to balance that.
Mine was even like, no, there's no highlighting on this. Like, that colour is flat. And it was like, actually, it's just not enough. So it's quite interesting. I've always said I don't mind if I don't get better, but I'd like to get quicker. And that still stands true. In fact, that's even more true now. I don't want to paint for competition, but I'm happy with my level. I just want it to be quicker.
Yeah.
But we'll see if I can get quicker. Who knows?
Who knows?
But yeah, that's what I've been doing. So, all busy, hoping to get some more games in, because it's been a little while with role playing at the club and playing a bit of 40k and everything else, which we'll get on to later, and the big debate that goes on. So we are talking 7th edition, or Horus Heresy 1st edition, I suppose we might be able to call it.
Is that its official name?
No, that's the name I'm giving it, because it's the first official Horus Heresy rule set we've got, isn't it? So, yeah, that's what I'm calling it. Rightly or wrongly. And we're also going to talk about how to be a good event or tournament gamer.
Yes.
To our, how much we know about that. And then I want to discuss competitive gaming in the Heresy, because it's something that's been appearing. So we're going to have a discussion about that as well. And Michael's coming on to talk The Crimson King, which ends up being like a half-hour odd chat without any real spoilers. It's like, wow, we can talk a lot without doing that, as you well know. So, but that was quite enjoyable, Michael. So hopefully you guys enjoy that, because, as I say, we had The Crimson King is now released, or is out this weekend. Crimson King, which won't go into. Dark Compliance, the audio by John French about Horus's emissary being sent to discuss why this forged planet should join his side, and why it's a good idea not to stay with the Imperium, which is really cool. Really interesting. It follows on the characters from the Talon series, so it might be worth reading that first. And then Black Library also have updated their coming soon page. So September we got Black Shield's audio, The False War by Josh Reynolds, which I don't know much about, but there's a rather angry looking dude on the front of it. And also now you can purchase, if you haven't done already, you can go and purchase Lorgar, the limited edition Primarchs. So they update the Black Library website near the start of every month. I think it's like the first Wednesday, Thursday-ish of the month. And like the July stuff, so they're a month ahead for pre-orders. So if you desperately want the limited edition, you can get that. Do remember though, if you're ordering from Black Library and you collect everything into one order, they will deliver it when the last one becomes available.
Right.
Which is quite annoying when you're like, oh, I'll buy all these books and Lorgar's ready, and it's like, your order's going to be delivered in a month and a half. And you're like, no.
Yes, you have to be a little bit careful then with what you put in your basket.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the Black Shields is due out in September. Yeah, and there's some really good stuff that they're doing at the moment at Library. Oh my lord, the Carrion Throne by it's a 40k book, but it's really good. By
you say that in a way that they're not all really good.
No, they're not all really good. Some of them, particularly some of the battle books. I say it because we're on a Heresy podcast, but actually some of them in the past have been fairly bad, or fairly aimed at a different audience. But Carrion Throne is Chris Wright doing Chris Wright, which is always good. Tends to work. So, loving it. And then Forge World, we only really have one release.
Yeah, there's the Big Bird.
The Thunderhawk, yeah. So this, because they sold out at Warhammer Fest Sunday, there were a few disappointed people. So
did they do the same trick where they kept some of them for the Sunday and then they had some on the Saturday as well?
I know there were some available on the Sunday. I don't know whether they were kept back for it or not. But yeah, you can buy the Thunderhawk, and for, 80 quid more, you can get it with the landing pad as well.
Well, exactly, because you need somewhere to park your Thunderhawk when you own one.
You do indeed. Not tack it to the ceiling like an Airfix kit.
Expensive Airfix kit.
Yeah, very expensive. It's a fantastic thing. Everyone at the Warhammer Fest said it looked so much better. When they actually looked at it, had a proper look at it, they were like, "Oh yeah, no, actually, it's so much better than it looked in the photo."
Do you know what I think is quite amazing? Is it's a bit like, you know, when they release a new version of whatever, it's a new version of a car, or you always then look at the old one and feel how dated it looks.
Yeah, you don't know what
it's strange. Nothing wrong with it until the moment you see the new one, and then it's like, oh.
Yeah, absolutely. It does look fantastic. It's really cool. And the only other thing that they've released now, Forge World, is the 40k. Well, they're up for pre-order. The index books for 40k, 8th edition, or new edition, updates for all your rules. So, again, we'll go into that later. But they're up, and they've included almost everything they do. So, almost all the Heresy stuff is now 40k legit, in some form or another.
Which is useful.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You know, it's just good. It means Forge World are going to keep selling shed loads of toys. Yes,
what's quite nice there is if you have got a bit of a crossover army, you don't feel as though you've been shortchanged by how the Heresy First Edition rulebook is going to affect you. If you know what I mean, if you've got one of those armies where you could quite easily say, well, it's a Dark Angels army, but it's also a Dark Angels in 40k army, and suddenly your Spartan tank is no longer valid, but now at least it will be.
Absolutely perfect, because it's loyalists and traitors for both systems as well.
Exactly.
So it's really good. Yeah, the old jokes are the best jokes.
Indeed.
Yeah. But essentially, okay, we have Warhammer Fest, which we covered, but nice quiet start to the new system. I mean, Forge World have been releasing stuff, just not Heresy stuff. So it's cool, and that's understandable. Building up for 40k. So. Lots of cool stuff. Awesome.
Lots of cool stuff.
Right, we'll take a break there, and we shall come back and chat about the new rule sets, or not so new rule sets. Well, we're here. We know exactly what's going on with the Heresy for the short-term future, at least. We're going to get what we're calling the Horus Heresy First Edition.
That's the Imperial Truth unofficial name, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Whether other people are happy with that name or not, it's the first time it's got its own full edition, so dedicated to it, even if it is stolen from elsewhere. But, whatever. And it's caused some fuss online, shall we say, in various groups and things like that. And it's probably fair that we have a little discussion about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Now, I know we discussed this on Warhammer Fest, I think, on the Sunday. And you sort of made your views quite clear to me that you're a big advocate of changing to 8, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And I know not everyone is, but in the long run, I think it will be better for it. I think we'll go into that later. I think, first off, we should address what's happened. So, I've actually seen some comments online, and there's some real kind of polarized opinions about what should have been done and what shouldn't have been done, and why things were done. And there's some statements being made by people, and maybe I've done that as well, come across as a statement of knowing things when I haven't. But people are saying, oh, they've stayed this for this reason, they stayed that for this reason. My initial reaction was, unfortunately we lost Alan, lead writer, at a time when they would need the writing team to be on it, with a lot of work to do with Angelos and changing the next book, and changing everything to 8th. We've known that they've been prepping for all the 40k books to be finished, ready for as close to release as they can be, and they still didn't quite make it with all the stuff. So, they had work on their plate as it is. And now to then go and have to do that all for Horus Heresy would take some time. They can't necessarily just bring writers in to do that because that's taking them from other places. And do you want to employ more people just to do that aspect of the job? That would be a bit probably counterproductive in the long run. And I think with obviously Alan's illness and passing away, that was the final kind of, right, we'll stick 7th. And go with that, with what they've got, with what they've worked with. That was a kind of alluded to. I think ADB put a post on somewhere, and he essentially says, look at the timings. So we knew in February, Alan said, Heresy is a 40k. It's an addition to the 40k rules, and that was very much what was coming out of their mouths at that point. And then it changed. At Warhammer Fest, and that was the first everyone really knew that it was changing. So yeah. I do think
the weird thing was, and I know we know about it now, but do you remember when they did the little snippet when they first released the info about 8th, and they said if you play Horus Heresy, carry on using 7th, your 7th edition rule book, and then that all Warhammer TV bit where they were discussing bits, and they said they were going to discuss about Horus Heresy, and they never really got onto the subject.
Yeah,
it's obviously been a thing that it's a big task to do, isn't it, to undertake? So I mean, obviously they it gives them more time, doesn't it, to change it?
Yeah, it does. It allows them to figure out what they're doing, figure out if 8th is successful or new edition is successful. And go with it whilst they maintain a rule set that they know works to a certain point. And that's the decision they've made. And I'm not going to say that's right or wrong. That is the decision they made. Am I disappointed that we're staying 7th? Yes. But realistically, I mean, yeah, we've seen a lot of chat about it, but it is, it is what it is. The decision's been made. We're going to get this book out, and we're going to be staying 7th for however long. Now, I say that because, Tony said there were reasons for staying 7th, and it was, the Heresy works in 7th and things like that. I'm not 100% sold on those reasons, but he probably had to say something. To do that. It's a very hard position to be in.
They've got to put something behind that, haven't they?
Yeah.
And sell it to you as this is a good thing.
And let's face it, certainly worked better for Horus Heresy with its more rigid structure than it did for Warhammer, also for the competitive nature of the games and how they worked. So I do think there is certainly an aspect that for Horus Heresy it was a better system than it was for 40k. And that's because of a lot of different things and everything else. But
indeed.
But in the future, I can honestly see that if everything goes well and they get kind of sorted out and settled down and everything else, that we will still move to 8th edition or the new edition or whatever they're calling it, because it just makes sense. And we'll go into some reasons why for that later. But as I say, online, we've had people saying, I was always going to do this, and then other people saying, they've robbed us of staying with 8th, and people trying to say that the way Inferno was written showed us all that it was staying 7th. I really don't think. It's really easy to attribute stuff in hindsight. I really don't think you need to be reading that much into it, and it is kind of irrelevant now. We've got the situation we've got. Let's move on with that. And there are divides in the community online. There are people who are making 8th edition rules for the Legions and then on the other side of that, there are people saying, well, you couldn't do them in 8th edition because of this and this and this. And it's like, well, actually, any rule can be made. It's all about how the army feels. It might not necessarily be exactly the same way, but in Age of Sigmar, all the armies play how you think they should play according to the law. So it might take work to get them there, but they can all be done. The game system is rigid, is solid enough to be able to sustain that. So that's not really a major issue. Yeah,
and I do honestly think that, I really like the way the game currently plays. And when I heard of, when we first were told, Heresy's staying as it is, I was quite relieved in a way. I was like, okay, good. I like how it is. Let's not jump in. But you know what? By the time 8 is properly developed, that for me would be then a great way of then taking Heresy over to it rather than diving into the unknown. I know it sounds a bit,
Yeah.
It's quite nice to have that sort of almost that comfort blanket of let them sort out 8th and get all the niggles out and sort out all the bits and pieces, and then once we know where everything is, move over.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I played a few games of 8th. Now I've had the rule books because GW sent them to me and all that jazz, and the system seems solid. Is it simpler to play? Yes. Does that detract from gameplay? Not 100%. We were playing the other day, and there were certainly tactics to be employed, lots of tactics and lots of things to frustrate your enemy with, and all that kind of jazz, and plenty to think about as well. But it would be a lot of work, as we say. There's a lot of stuff to go on. So as it stands now, at some point soon, we're going to be getting this Horus Heresy rulebook. Age of Darkness rulebook, whatever, I can't remember what it's actually going to be called, but it's essentially the 7th edition rulebook reprinted without the stuff that's not relevant. That is essentially what we're getting. So again, we see people saying 7.5 edition. That's not what they said, and looking at the timescale, that's not what they've got time to do. I did talk to a couple of members of staff and said, what are the chances of highlighting a few issues, and they said you'd have to be super quick and to get it in and done, and I thought about doing some bits, but I thought actually you need to think through a change as well, because of the way it can change other stuff. So I suspect, Tony said if you've got a copy of the rulebook, you don't need this book, so that's how similar it is. They might
which
release,
completely says that there's just parts they're not going to print.
Yeah, they might take the opportunity just to clear 1 or 2 or 3 things up as well, but then they can just issue an errata and an FAQ to sort that out. Now, going forwards, if they choose to stay with 7 for a period of time, they could then play with the rules, but I wouldn't expect that to happen for a while, because they've got them hands full with doing Imperial Armor books and the Horus Heresy books, and everything else they're doing.
I think the key thing there is they've done that in the past, but the way they've done that is to create their own new rule. Really was how it pretty much panned out, wasn't it? It was a case of, okay, let's create this new jazzy rule, and it does this to allows Primarch to do this, or it allows this unit to do that, rather than let's fundamentally change one of the old 40k rules. So I think really, it's a case of, why would they then have to want to go back and start tinkering with that when it's just basically the bare bones and the core structure that they need to get the books to operate.
Yeah, and that's the minimum they have to do. It leads on to certain other questions. Some people are hoping that they're going to do all the legions in 7th edition before moving on. Well, I think if you're moving on, what's the point? Personally, there will obviously be some people who want to stick to 7th edition because that's the game they want to play, but that number will dwindle, as it almost does with almost every system that moves on editions and people stay behind. There might be a small core of people who really hardcore stick to it, but 90% of the people playing will just move on.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see with that. It does mean that they don't have to, for any work they've done on Angelos, they can keep that and keep moving forwards.
Yeah.
Let's face it, the story wouldn't have changed. And it was quite funny to see in the build up to Warhammer Fest, Heresy Trading on Facebook was full of black books. It's just full of people selling their black books, assuming that we were going to change edition like I did. And people, these books are now worthless and everything else. And then, of course, we had the announcement, and then some people are talking about buying books, these black books, if they can. But as we said before, the first 3 books were out of date within the third book was out of date in a year or so. And the others have been superseded at various points as well. And that's always going to happen.
Yeah, because the red editions have systematically updated pretty much nearly everything in those books. I mean, I think the last update we got did a massive tweak to nearly all the legions, didn't it? It changed lots of special units, points, costs, even some special rules. So it made a big difference.
Yeah, and I understand that if your sole thing is game playing, then it is going to affect you. But let's face it, unless you want Inferno, you can get the rules for everything else pretty much elsewhere. So, yeah, hey, it is what it is on that front as well. If you're buying those black books, you are still paying for the quality of the story, the quality of the product, and the artwork and everything else. And that those rules and the campaign system's still viable. And then the Legion rules are a fifth, a sixth of the book. So you're really not, the background isn't going to be eradicated with a change to a new edition.
Well, yeah, they had to change the whole storyline of the Horus Heresy because they changed the 8th.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Other things maybe look at, but even then now, Games Workshop have got to a point now where they have people who look at how a decision affects the rest of the IP, They try and make sure things are going on. And there's lots of talks in 40k at the moment about what Primarchs might be coming back and whatever. And saying that it might invalidate some of the stuff in the Heresy and all this. And I'm like, well, I'd be sad if it did, or it changed it too much. But I also think there are plenty of ways to get around it without invalidating what's gone before or changing what's gone before. So, have a bit of faith in them, and save the moaning for if they really do muck it up. Because you never know. They might not.
And to be honest, let's face it, if they had done this big changeover to 8th, they could have mucked it up. They could have done a real cut and paste sort of job on Primarchs, and then everyone would be just absolutely up in arms that they haven't got that feel of how their Legion played and all this sort of stuff. And it could be that, if they rushed it, we could have ended up with that, and that would have been a lot worse.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we either had to move or not move, not a get you by list or anything like that. It needed to be a full bomb. Here we go. Boosh. Everything's ready to roll. And that was never going to happen on release date. But as I say, this has caused some rifts. I think it's fair to say there's some rifts, there's some disappointment on, sides. There's a lot of excitement for 40k at the moment. In fact, we're recording this a day after doing the intro and stuff. And it's I think, all the distributors got told, don't worry about how many copies of the game there are. We are not going to sell out. Right, GW have got that many in stock. And then I see Element put a thing out saying, after a certain time on the 12th, we can't guarantee your stock, which shows how well this must be selling.
Yes.
Because, that's a lot of games. And I see people from Age of Sigmar, Heresy, all these other communities, people playing Infinity, things like that, who are getting drawn back in.
I think the big thing when you do a big rules reset is that I think where people get a bit disillusioned with a certain, rule set, you can think, well, actually, do you know what? Let's see what this new one's like. If everyone's starting from the same place, will my army become valid again? Will it mean that the things I didn't like, have they been fixed? And I think it does draw a lot of people back in, and especially for the fact that this change to 8th has been very much a major reset like the AOS was, rather than just keep tweaking the version we've got, take a few rules out, put a few rules in, sort of thing, just to try and freshen it up. I think there's been a massive community response because everyone's so excited to see what it is, how it plays, people that haven't played maybe for 10 years could say, well, actually, yeah, let's get my army out. Let's get a rule book. Let's get some dice out and let's play a game. I think it's a big jump for people because, I don't consider myself a 40k player anymore, but you start thinking, well, do you know what? Maybe I could get like a little 40k force together because suddenly with a new rule set, you don't feel as though you're starting on the back foot anymore. Like I probably would have if I thought, do you know what? If should I get my Dark Elder out? No, I won't. I don't really know the rules very well anymore, and there are too many competitive players out there, and you sort of get put off by it. But with a new rule set, it all becomes viable again.
Yeah, it's done a few things to kind of go into that. The 40k has the best lore. It has the most comprehensive lore of GW's systems, and the Horus Heresy is part of the 40k lore. So, when you're talking 40k, you have to include Horus Heresy in that. And people love it. There's books out, there's so many books out, novels, background, role-playing games. It's all out there. And the amount of people who are in love with the lore, who maybe never played the game, or maybe used to play it, moved away from it, or what have you. The game became difficult to kind of understand from an outside point of view. Now, when you go and learn the game in a Games Workshop, it was fine because they'll teach you in a very measured, planned way, which is to break the game down, to not show you all the rules, things like that. But if you're going to teach your mate at the club and you haven't been or you don't think that way, haven't been trained that way, and it's like, right, put all these down. Okay, this is how vehicle facing works. Some of it's quite counterintuitive. So, and some of it's just complicated remembering stuff. There's a lot of things to remember in 7th edition. Now, new edition comes out, and it's straightforward, and 90% of it is intuitive, and you put models down, and you just play. And the odd thing you're going to have to look up, but most of that game is going to be very easy to learn within one game setting. Now, nuances of it, that's another story. But just that fact means when people, rather than people saying, oh, that looks cool, ooh, I wonder how it works, it's, that looks cool, well, I might as well try it. Mm. And this is what we started to see.
I think that's the big thing for me. It's this whole new way of playing. Suddenly, it feels like, well, I want to see how that works. I want to get involved. And I think the community team massively have helped with this sort of thing now, because you're getting more information and you're getting good quality stuff up front. It's not just a case of a big release that had a few leaks online. There's been plenty of build up to it as well, which I think adds into the momentum that it's gained as well over the last month or so.
Yeah, they've controlled the hype.
Yes,
at the end of the day, and they've done a good job of it, and that's generated this real feel for 40k, and that's cool. It's their major system. The other thing that it does is, much like Age of Sigmar, it's got 3 ways to play, so narrative, open, and matched. Now, open is possibly the one you might see the least, which is a bit weird, but match play, and 40k has done something further than Age of Sigmar, and you've got narrative points and match play points effectively. And this means that you can go into a game at your club and set out what type of game you want to play purely by saying match play or narrative play. And so if you say to someone narrative play, automatically that's become a part of that contract that you have. And so someone might say, oh, I was going to bring all this stuff, but he wants to play narrative. Okay, I'll tone it down a touch. Now, that's not always going to happen. But in an environment where 40k on the independent scene was all about the tournament, the win, it means that you weren't getting the narrative players at those events. And it partly frustrates me that people say, oh, 40k players are like this. The vast majority of 40k players I know personally don't play absolute guts out 40k. They are lovers of the story. They want to play their army the way they want to play it. A lot of them were using the allies matrix, like before it got crazy, to create their cool armies, which is what it was there for. It wasn't there to have one Riptide, one, Eldar, whatever, and like that. That became, that was a byproduct of allowing the people the freedom to play the army they wanted to play without thinking things through fully. So what you've got now with the system of faction keywords and all that jazz is you've got the ability to do that in a modern setting, modern style of game, which is also a very appealing thing. 40k has been essentially the same from 3rd edition. So what was that? When was that? 96, 7?
Yeah. So right? Around then it was. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, probably. Okay, so that's 20 years. It hasn't really changed a huge amount. Bits of it have changed, but the game is fairly recognisable to back then.
Yeah, if you compared the 3rd edition to 7th, there's a lot of similarities there, isn't there?
Yeah. And all of a sudden you moved it 20 years on in design. So just think about computer games 20 years ago. They were very different than computer games we're playing now. And that's because audiences change as well. So it's sleeker, it's quicker, it's more engaging, and it keeps you in there. And then it allows you to do things that make sense. So you can have your Space Marines with your Imperial Guardsmen and, some Death Watch and some Inquisitors, because you know what? You've read that in the stories. Now, is that the killer combo that helps you win the game? Probably not, because factions will work within each other because they boost each other and synergies and all that jazz. But there'll be the odd little thing for the competitive guys who can see actually, elements of this, elements of that work together makes it a more effective fighting force. Mm-hmm. But it's not one of this, one of that, a dude here, a dude there, to try and, end up with one big unit of 30 dudes running around the table unkillable. You can tell straight away that that's not what Games Workshop want their games to be. Yeah. And now they've made a structure where it isn't that way. So when you think about that breakdown, if you took that into Heresy, that's almost perfect. Because maybe in Heresy more people sit in the narrative, but there are still those people who are towards competitive. And there's definitely an element of that, definitely. And it would fit well. And the other thing they're doing is they're going to have a living kind of point system, which is another thing Forge World would have to think about if they move to a new system. If they move to this new system and 40k were updating every year on points and whatever, and Heresy weren't, then that would be an issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But what that then allows is to make sure that every unit then becomes, accessible. So, you're always, no matter what the system is, you're always going to have a best unit. And that value can change, but there are obviously going to be some units are going to perform better than others, no matter what. You can't have everything on an exactly even keel. But what you can have is much less disparity between the good stuff and the bad stuff. Which again is what Heresy players want, because when you read the forum post, there's a lot of confusion between play the army you want, take the units you look cool, to, this unit doesn't do much, so I've upgraded it to this unit.
Yeah, and there's definitely two schools of thought there, as we've discussed many times, that you do get a lot of people saying, well, I just buy what's cool, and then in the next sentence, I don't like this unit because it's no good in the game. No. So,
let's not forget that player ability does come into that as well, but, there are certain units that are, even with the new points cost, I haven't seen that many jump troops in the Heresy. And think about what their points were initially at. So, it makes sense. So, how does this affect us? So, moving forwards, I'm playing Heresy, so I'm playing 7th edition. Cool. That's the way it is. Just going to have to get on with it. So, my events are all 7th edition. And for the people already playing the game, in general, that's like not an unsurmountable object. We can carry on the way we have been. Now, there are people who having been excited about 40k and having played the game and seen how the game flows and have enjoyed that. Not everyone will, but a lot of people have. I say there are groups around who've started to adapt the rules of Heresy for 8th edition already to go and play that. Again, that's a splinter group, and it'll be interesting to see how many people do choose to go that way and how well it kind of generates more players in that style.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and with different.
It's a lot of work that you're going to get criticised for when you put your rules up online and goes, "Oh, I don't like what you've done with Corax."
Yeah, exactly. All the grief that GW get, you can get instead.
Yeah.
And that's cool. You know, if people are prepared to put that work in and play that, I can see there being like 3 or 4 different versions, which again's fine. If the people you play with are happy with what you're playing, then, you know, it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
I think for me the biggest loss to Heresy is the ability to cross over into 40k when you just want to play a pickup game.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not, and this is probably the biggest effect that we've got. It's harsh in a number of ways. So, yep, I've got friends who don't play Heresy, who play 40k. I could always bring my Heresy out against them and play them, and we can make it work. Now, potentially there is ways of doing that because Forge World, almost everything they make is now in these index books, but you haven't got Legion rules and that, so whether you want to do it that way, it's not going to feel anywhere near the same for you as a Heresy player. So what that then means is I go to the club and I don't play those people if I don't play 40k. Mm-hmm. So, like, the best case scenario is there's a few people that I never really play, right? Which is disappointing for people. Now, take this to someone who lives in a remote part of America, Australia, you know, even England, where there's a small group of 5 or 6 players and only 2 of you play Heresy. Now, suddenly every game of Heresy you've got is against that one other person because you haven't got the option to do it, to say, you know, to change. How long do those people hold out as bastions of Heresy? It's really hard, and I think we're going to lose some Heresy players purely for that reason. You know, some places where the person's the only person who regularly plays Heresy, and they've had to kind of, I play against 40k opponents for 90% of my games, and every now and then, like, someone's around, or I drive a few hours and get a Heresy gaming. You know, it would be hard. It would be hard to maintain your love for playing the Heresy in those circumstances, and that's completely understandable.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest. I think the biggest loss in my eyes is the fact that, you know, being able to have those pick-up games where I've got friends that will just go down to a gaming club, and if someone's got an army of orcs or Elder, they'll just get their 30k out and say, "Do you fancy a game?" And then suddenly you have a division because you can't do that. And then you go, "Oh, is there any Heresy players here?" And then when you get to, I didn't bring my Heresy army, then it's sort of watering down and demotivating you to maybe keep battling on and playing with that army. And, you know, I think we do need that crossover.
Yeah.
To keep it fresh.
Yeah, so I think we will lose the odd player, and that's bad, but that doesn't kill the Heresy. That is, you know, you can as a community, you can push past that, and the community doesn't need to, you know, it sounds bad because you point out those 1 or 2 people, but the community doesn't need to suffer too much because of that. However, once you get to that situation where you've not got those players, and then you are saying, well, come and play Heresy, and someone says, oh, okay, all right, well, you need to buy this book. Okay, right, so how do we move? Yeah, just move normally? Well, yeah, that's fine. And shooting, I need this to hit. Well, let's look at these profiles, and then, oh, no, this works differently. Oh, no, this works differently. Oh, no. And all of a sudden, it's like, I have to remember all these rules. And it's when it comes to things like vehicles, and it's when it comes to other stuff like that. They're so easy in the modern system of hit, wound, save, and there's modifiers to that. I'm not saying there aren't, but it's like, which angle is this in? How does this cover work? How does this work when I can see these people and not see those people? This gun's trying to fire at them. How, you know, the templates doing, have you even got templates? Because these guys are playing 40k. Forge World are going to have to sell their own templates, you know? It's the little things like that, and people are going to go, oh, I can't be bothered. Because in the same time it takes to learn the basic rules of Heresy, you can have been playing 40k for hours and weeks, because it takes a long time to get these. If you go back to remember before you played 40k or old Warhammer, there's a lot to remember.
Definitely.
And without people coming, and as I've said it about other game systems before, I've said it about Ninth Age, I've said it about other things, and I believe it, that fresh blood into the hobby is paramount to keeping it going, because, you are just going to fade without it. And this is where my concern is. And this is why I don't think it will be, a majorly long time till we change over. Now, how Forge World kind of work out when they do that, is a different thing, if they choose to do it. Because, as I say, with the index books and with all the models being available to be played in 40k, actually, they might see an increase in sales. Because Leviathans are suddenly now available for Chaos players. Well,
yes.
Having seen their rules, they're going to sell a lot of Leviathans. It's just going to have the Spartans and the Mastodons and the cool toys are going to get sold. So, yeah, Forge World sales go up. Brilliant. Is that because of Heresy? Probably not, What they might have to keep an eye on is the books they sell. How many of the rule sets they sell. How many of the black books and the red books they sell. And it'll be interesting because I don't know. I don't know what their sales figures are for those. But it'll be interesting to see how that affects things. Also, the other way of looking at it is potentially is independent events. How many tickets are sold for those? I've seen a few people who came to my last event who said, they're not sure they're going to play a 7th edition Heresy at all. They might work on an 8th edition Heresy, but they just don't want to play a system which is now, to them, feels outdated and heavy and clunky compared to this really streamlined, fun system that they've got.
Yeah, and I think that will be the turning point where everyone really is deeply in 8th and they're loving how it works, how it plays, and, people have played both systems and they'll just be thinking, do you know what, I really wish we could do this to Heresy. And I do think it's going to come. I think it's just going to take a bit of time.
Yeah, and, Forge World, we know Forge World and Games Workshop are much more, they've been aware of the forums and social media for, quite a long time. That's, it'd be naive to think they weren't looking back then. And they are aware of the chats that go on. And it's like, I almost want to say let's campaign, but, at the end of the day, it's going to take time anyway. And campaigning for this is not necessarily the right way to go about it. But I'm going to play some Heresy. I'm going to see in my club how easy it is to keep playing Heresy. And as a person who was going to play some 40k, how much I want to keep playing in a system where super heavies are running around, and not getting damaged, let alone, stopping working. Whereas over in 40k, actually, yes, that Riptide's taken 8 wounds and he's less effective now. Because, as I said, I've always said that was something for me which really bugged me. And to see it working in the other systems, it's like, that's so cool. It's cool. It's there. And, the little things like the Death Stars not being able to create the same kind of overwhelming force in one area that you could in the old system, to me makes the game more fun. It might not for everyone. So it's going to be an interesting personal journey as well to see how we're going through it. And I'm going to try and keep an eye out and an ear out on the forums and other clubs and see what's happening elsewhere. And I'm running 2 events. I'm running an event in September and an event in November. And hopefully we're still going to see a lot of people who want to come and play that. And there's going to be hardcore, Heresy fans who are going to stay glad that it doesn't change. And that's cool, all power to them. But, yeah, it's up in the air. Those are my kind of thoughts. The big problem, as I say, is how many players do we lose and how many players do we not drag in with this? And that's going to be a bit of a hard thing, I think, potentially. I mean, it might not be, but I think it's going to affect. Certainly, it is going to affect some groups. I'm going to say that now. You know, some people sit there and say, "Oh no, it's not a problem, not a problem." It's like, great, awesome, you're in a group where it's not a problem, but there are going to be people who fade away from playing the Heresy, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think we've got to give it time, and I do think that there will be some people that possibly will leave, but I'm hoping that most people are in the Heresy for quite a deep love of of the fluff and the models and the books, and hopefully that would keep most people in for a long enough period for them to maybe make the changes over, and people wouldn't be just going, do you know what, I've had enough of this, and just move straight over to 40k and get rid of their army. I don't think there'd be many people that would be doing that, but you never know.
But there might not be that need. You've still got all the novels, and you can still use all your models for 40k. So you can still have a Heresy army without necessarily playing the Heresy.
Yeah.
So
that's the other option, isn't it? Just try and move it over.
Yeah, and it might not be ideal. So there's going to be a lot of different things going on. Just have to hope that, as I say, we come through it strong. I think we will. And I think, as I say, I still think we're going to move over. And obviously, Forge World have got some stuff to do, got some people to employ and things like that. They've got a big set of shoes to fill. And all the best doing that. And I'm sure they'll pick the right person for the job, because they tend to, quite frankly,
Yes, they do, yeah.
Yeah, we'll move forwards. But is there anything else you want to talk about for?
No, not particularly. I'll give it a bit of time. Luckily, I don't play a huge amount at all, so I'm not overly affected.
Well, in fact, actually, for people like you, I honestly think that the new edition will be much better, because that time between games won't have as much a detrimental effect on the rules in your mind.
Yes, yeah.
I honestly think that is that. And then, all wargaming is the more you play it, the better you will get. There's no doubt about that. But there are scales.
My memory for rules is sometimes quite appalling, because when I'm trying to recall rules, it's like, which edition is that I'm trying to remember, because I've played so little. Yeah. And it is quite tricky.
And certainly for 40k, there were times when I was like, are you sure that rule's been done right? Because that seems counterintuitive to the way the game plays. It's like, oh no, we've done it slightly wrong. Most of it. There are some things in there which, not everything's going to be smooth in a game system. There are going to be the odd thing which buck the trend a little bit, but it seems to fit quite well. But hey ho. Awesome. We'll have a little bit of a break, and we'll come back with how to. Well, let's move on into how to be a better noob at events. So this is following on from being new to a gaming club or a gaming scene. This is taking it to, you want to attend your first event, narrative or competitive, or free form or what have you, and what we think we should do. I mean,
and this is probably quite true for me, because I had, when we went to, do you remember your event at Firestorm?
Yeah.
The Taka and Reaver one. That was my first event that I'd ever been to. So I very much can hone in on some of these points.
Well, I've had a few questions of, I've had a couple of people at the club, Giles at the club, is like, he wants September to be his first event, and he's like, I'm trying to do this, trying to do that. I'm like, cool, okay, yeah, looking at that. And I've had other people say, oh yeah, no, I want to get my army up ready for an event, kind of, what should it be, like, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, it's a question that's out there. It's a question that I think sometimes experienced people are just like, turn up. But actually, not for everyone is that easy, awesome.
Exactly.
But it's, sometimes the obvious things aren't obvious to some people, or they just need a bit of confirmation. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Definitely. I think for the first thing for me, and this is something that was you did bang on about a lot at the first event and subsequent event, was to read the event pack.
Yes. As an event organizer, you talk to any event organizer, only a certain percentage of the people coming will read the event pack. But if it's your first event, it's probably that much more important. The event pack should tell you, A, where to go, B, what time to be there, and C, kind of what you're expected to do. So all mine will do that, and most will do that. And then it will also tell you, well, it will give an informed kind of thing about maybe what games you're playing, what system it's going to run. You could be going to a tournament where you could be playing Loyalist versus Loyalist, and it could be completely Swiss, like the event at the end of November that's been announced, or one of the Open Warhammer Fest. Or you could be playing a fully narrative event where, you know, it's Loyalists versus Traitors, and you could be playing anyone depending on things, and things like grudges could happen and everything else. So having an idea of not being surprised when you get there by what's going on is a pretty useful thing.
Yeah, definitely. I know for me, you know, from the first event, I didn't read the event pack. You know, it was one of those ones I thought, it'd be fine. I'll just, you know, pick it up on the day and have a quick flick through. But it is important to read all the way through it and understand it. And hopefully, you know, the scenarios are a big, important part of it, because they often, you know, at the last event, it was very much sort of, I was going around saying to everyone, do you understand the scenario? Do you know what's going on? Because so many people just sort of rock up and go, oh, what are we playing? Oh, what setup is that? Oh, and then suddenly when you explain to them, oh no, if you kill that character, you auto win. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that means, if I'd known that, you know, it's one of those ones of make sure you understand the scenarios, because often with narrative events, there could be all sorts of hidden wonders in there that could change the course of a game.
Yeah, if you're going to a Games Workshop event, the chances are they're going to play one of the games out of the rulebook, because it's their rulebook and everything else. Yeah, if you're going to a narrative event, the chances are there'll be some slight changes in there. It's not even to help you win half the time. It's purely so you know what you're doing. Saves time when you get to the table. If you've got one that you don't fully understand, you might even get to practice it first. So you go, okay, right, okay, yeah, this thing that does this, does that. Okay, I know what I'm doing in this event, because no one wants to go to an event and get rolled over either. So if you're reading the event pack when it comes out, that usually gives you a certain amount of weeks or months before the event. You can feel comfortable going, you know what? I know how this works. So I know how the scenario works. So that's one less pressure on me. I can just enjoy the game.
Yeah.
But if you're like, oh no, we've done this bit wrong. Oh, we've done this bit wrong. Oh, sorry. You know, the one thing I hate doing is getting rules wrong. I do it all the time. Oh, sorry, mate. I should have taken this test. I should have done this at that point, and I didn't do it. You know, I do apologise. So it can just help you ease in with things like that, which is really cool.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think with that as well is, you know, as well as the scenarios, is, you know, your army list and your opponent's army list as well.
Yeah, certainly. So an event will tell you usually what points of armies to bring and what kind of armies you're allowed to bring. One thing that frustrates me as a tournament organizer is when those lists are late or wrong. It can cause problems. But also, you don't want to turn up to a table and have the guy turn around to you and go, that's not a legal army list. Because again, if you're new to the events, it's like an extra pressure on you. So when I write an army list out and I'm going to an event, I usually write it out. I usually have it, because I use Quartermaster a lot on my phone, but I'll check it. So I'll have Quartermaster out and then I'll go quick flick through so I know it's right. Now, if you've made your own Quartermaster file and you're 100% sure on that, then great, fine, whatever. But if it's your first event, I say just double check it. If you're not sure, because again, it's things like legality of having this character opens up these units. It's like, okay, so what does this those little bits and pieces. Sometimes it's easy to misunderstand or get them wrong.
Certain legions as well play in a very funny way.
Yeah.
And I always think the Alpha Legion can be a bit tricky with all their different ways that they work.
Yeah, and let's be fair, there's different interpretations of how they work as well. I know some people probably not happy with the way I rule how their army selection goes, but tough because that's the way I rule it. But yeah, if you aren't sure, get a friend to check it out. Say, look, this is my army. Can you check it for me before I send it off?
Yeah, everyone has one of those friends that can. He's very good at drilling down into the data.
Or an online forum, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a friend, And that's not to say that every event is going to be as super hard on it or what have you. But again, when we're talking about being new at something, you just want to take away all those potential issues.
Yeah, definitely.
So knowing where you need to turn up at what time, what your army you're bringing, and it's legitimate. And then once you get to the event, what's expected of you when you're there, even if it's just timings. It's like, okay, I've got 45 minutes for lunch, according to this thing, and I know that there's a food venue there. Brilliant. So when I finish, go and get lunch, come back. Not, what time does the next game start? Which is the most common question you get asked at an event is, what time's the next round start? What time's the next round start? And you just want to scream at people. It's in your event pack. But that's the nature of the beast. That's just us as human beings, I think. It's just easier to ask someone.
It's easier to ask and be herded than...
Yeah, absolutely. It's cool. It's not a major issue. So, I think that's when you're provided with something, that's what you can get from that. Going on from there, you need to think about what you're taking. So obviously you're going to need your army. It sounds obvious.
No, it's a silly question, but yes, yeah.
The amount of times people, have I got everything? And it's having everything. I usually put it together the night before or a couple of nights before. It's like, okay, what am I taking? And actually make sure, go through the list as I'm like making sure it's in the box. Yep. Because every now and then I'm like, oh yeah, no, I took that out because I wanted to show it to someone or whatever and put it down. So we go through it and check. And I've left models at home.
Leave something. I've done it before where you leave a vehicle behind because you've packed it in a different case or something, and then suddenly it's not in your usual bag.
Make sure it's painted as well.
I've
been to an event before. Been to an event before and gone, I forgot that model. I needed to paint that model. And having to run round trying to borrow I think it was a mounted sorcerer for a Chaos army. It does happen. It happens more than you think. You get kind of complacent in, or what usually happens is you're concentrating so much on getting something else done, you forget something. So yeah, get your army out before you go up. Make sure it's all present and correct. And then your dice, the things you need to play the game, your dice, your tape measure, a rule book, your army book, anything else you then might need, templates. Templates always going missing. So
templates were always the bane of my life, because if you got a certain type of army, you'd always need, if you had lots of graviton guns and things like that, where you got loads of templates to dish out and then they got to stay there. I'd always be looking in my bag going, I haven't got my templates.
I used to go to events with like two sets of two sets of complete templates, come back with like less than one, not one complete set. And then the next event I'll pick up I'll be above where I started at the first event. Don't mean it just happens.
Yes. Yeah,
templates used to go round and round and round. I think, apart from those ones that were really obviously some ones, I reckon there was just a rotating kind of thing of templates. But so all that stuff that you need. A lot of the time, an army list, either to show to your opponent or just for yourself, so you know exactly what you've got, what's coming out. You can answer questions. Also, if you're really new, a cheat sheet for that army list as well.
I was going to say a cheat sheet, because I do like the army list where you've got all of the stat lines noted down on there, the weapons, even some special rules, because I tell you what, it saves a lot of mucking about when you're trying to flick through a book saying, someone goes, yeah, but what does that rule actually do? Or, you know, and you just go, oh. And it's questions sometimes, I find I'm forever looking up the strength and toughness of certain characters. You know, when you sometimes think, I think it's 7. I swear it's 7.
I'm a mechanic.
And then you have to look it up.
Yeah, I'm a Mechanicum player. Half the guns I still don't know 100%. I have a rough idea, you know, because they are slightly askew from the way everything else works. But when we say cheat sheets, so there's you know, items and things like that, but also potentially what you need to do in each phase. Like, I've seen people with don't forget the psychic phase.
Yes,
because they go into shooting, they've shot 2 units and they've gone, oh, okay, I forgot to do that. Or cyberthurgy, right, which I have to do at the start of the shooting phase. I forget it almost every time. And, you know, I can't, I feel bad if I turn around to my opponent and say, oh, can I do this power? Because, you know, I've missed out. It's my fault.
Reserve roles.
Yeah, reserve roles, all those little things. Ultramarine players, like, if you've already shot a unit with a Ultramarines unit, you get the reroll 1s. You know, all those little things that can easily be forgotten when you get into the heat of the battle. So,
definitely.
Yeah, that cheat sheet for that kind of stuff can be really good as well. And then the other little bits, glue.
Yes.
I don't always do this, but a nice extra is to have a pot of super glue in there just in case you break a model. It happens. And someone is always running around at some point asking for a bit of glue because, you know, these models are a bit prone to getting knocked.
Yeah, they do, and certain armies are worse than others.
Yeah, absolutely. And then things like snacks. If you're going to be in a venue, you know there's not a shop right next door, you might want, like, you know, bananas are great for this kind of thing. Bit of energy. Because sometimes it can be long and tiring. If you're concentrating on a game for 2.5 hours and you've only got a half-hour break into the next one, you've packed up your army, you're almost straight into it, then, you know, a drink, a banana, something like that, a bit of chocolate, or a protein bar, just to keep you going. Some people it's really important, some people it doesn't matter so much. And then things like spare t-shirt. Some of these venues are not the most climate controlled venues, and they do get warm. You know, when we're playing in that sports hall, that was getting warm.
Yeah, that second day, I seem to recall, was hotter than the first as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes it's a spare t-shirt, you know, can of deodorant, all those kind of stuff. They just, you know, they're useful. They don't take up much room. Chuck them in.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
Painkillers is one. Quite often people get headaches in those kind of environments because the noise level tends to rise through the day. You know, that kind of stuff could be really good. And if you know you're going to go out and drink in the evenings, maybe some something to help the head in the morning.
Yes, definitely.
Pep a bit of life back into you. So all those little bits and pieces. You don't need to fill up a whole nother bag with them, but there's 2 or 3 in there. Each person will know which are more kind of suitable to them. You know, I don't have to worry about the headaches in the morning from drinking because I don't drink. So sorted.
You do wake up with a sore head though.
I certainly do if I've been not wearing my sleep mask.
Yeah,
it's all good. The other thing, moving on to the next one, is being open. So this is something I still do, right, quite a lot. I have trouble with certain rules. So there are times playing certain games where for some reason I've got stuck in my head that this rule works a certain way, or I ignore a certain rule. And the amount of times at a game I say, look, if you see me doing something you think's wrong, question me on it. It's fine. Chances are I might be doing it wrong. Also, if you don't see me taking, I can't remember which one it was now, but it might have been something like a panic test for a specific reason, you know, then pull me up on it because I have a trouble remembering to do that one. You know, don't be afraid to say, dude, you've got to take that test there.
Yes, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, completely.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's, you know, generally, Heresy, you'll be going to narrative events, people are kind of chilled, want to enjoy their game. There's a balance between we'll go in, but there's doing that is not an issue. That's not going to cause an issue, and addressing that before it becomes a problem can be really good. I don't think that many of my opponents would have an issue, would think I'm cheating if I forget to do something, but I know I forget to do it, so why not just broach it first? It doesn't happen that much actually anymore. I think it was mainly with Warhammer. There was a couple of rules in there that I was like, no, I just never remember that one. Like march tests, that was always one. I'd always just move stuff and people would go, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, yeah. Cheating, apparently.
Yeah. Oh, you caught me.
Yeah, but it's things like, I say, mechanic and weapons. I said, if you're unsure, let me know. Because I can look in the book to double check, and people say, "Oh no, I'm sure you're right." It's like, well, no, actually, right, I might not be right, and it's important for me to get it right as it is for the game, for it to be right in the game as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, because one thing you can do if you are new to an event, you can say, "Look, I've been playing, but this is my first event, and hopefully we're going to have fun." Blah blah blah. But by saying that. I sometimes feel that's a bit tricky. Personally, if someone said to me, it's my first event, I'd be like, oh, cool. That's awesome. Okay, what you playing? I had been playing, why'd you come, and all that stuff. And if they were doing something, I might sit there and think, okay, this guy's a new guy. So maybe it's not first event, maybe it's I've not been playing the game a huge amount of time. So there's a couple of rules that don't get me. I think it depends on who you are as well for that one. But it can help take any tension out of a situation.
Sure.
And another thing is, as a new player at events, you might not be as familiar with all the legions and all the rules that they can do.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Never be afraid. Like at the start of the game, I will go through my army anyway and explain what everything is. And then sometimes, particularly with Mechanicum, you see the glaze. As people just like too many different stuff, and I'm like, and then it'll be like, okay, you got any questions? At any point, ask me. But also, okay, so this guy, and I'll break it down. This guy kills tanks. This guy does that, because sometimes it's not easy to tell, and particularly with Mechanicum, it becomes another issue. But if you're new and someone's going, okay, I've got these headhunters, and they do this, and I've got this, and then I've got Dynat, and then they're like, okay, I've heard something about Dynat. How does he work? Oh, he does this. Oh, yes, I've also got a Saboteur. It's like, and they interact, do they? Yes, they do this and blow up one of your tanks, and you can't do anything about it. But at least you know them before the game, so it doesn't feel like you're hard-pressed during the game to try and do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are and also, the other thing to be very careful of as well is legions have changed over the course of the books. Yep. Certain rules have been tweaked. So it's also worth, if someone says, oh, and it does this, it's sometimes worth having a little, in a quiet period, just flicking through and double checking, because, so many times you could say, oh, yeah, it did that in book 2. And then since the latest Red Book, it now does this, so there is complexity on different levels.
Yeah, definitely right. There's a lot of stuff going on in this game, and it just the more you do up front, and it doesn't have to become an hour of talking about armies. It's very much an overview. So unless it's something specific where I'll explain my Ordinator's rules because actually it makes him really good at killing tanks for a combination of reasons with his weapons he's got. So it's like, yes, he adds an extra D6 onto armor pen. And he's also got a lance weapon that, brings your armor down to 12 and to blah, 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 blah. That's very simple to say, but to go through, this weapon's strength 6, lance, and then he's also Ordinator, might not necessarily connect.
Yeah, sure. Because not everyone's going to know that.
Yeah. And then, as you say, things do change. One thing, as a new player, it can be hard to do is question in-game when you think someone's wrong or something doesn't sound right. And this, again, I've seen it happen where people have played a whole game and said, I think he was doing this wrong. And I said, did you ask him? He said, well, I kind of asked. And he said, no, it's right. And I'm like, well, in Heresy, if you've got the red books, sometimes you've got access to their stats and everything to check
it's
anyway.
one of the beautiful things about the Heresy, actually.
Don't be afraid of just saying, and you word it the right way, because 99.9% of the time people aren't cheating. They just, if they have got something wrong, they've just misread it, or they misunderstood it, or just forget. Because 99.9% of the time it's not someone cheating, it's someone misreading, misunderstanding, or forgetting the stat line or the rule. But what you can do is say, oh, okay, I didn't realise he had that. Awesome. I want to check what else he's got. And so you can kind of have a little look yourself under a pretense of just like, oh, yeah, cool. And then you can say, oh, sorry, mate, actually, no, I was right. He does have toughness 4, or, whatever, or what have you. Oh, cool, he also does this and this and this. But that way you're creating, it's almost like you're saying, oh, no, actually, yeah, surprise, I was right. You're not accusing them of anything. You're just saying, oh, did you know that you got it wrong? Which allows people, it means that they're not feel like they're being accused of anything. But also, if they are being a little bit funny, it allows them a way out and to say that, all right, mate, I just want to play the game. So I've seen it happen. I've seen many cases where people have not said anything and felt they should have and wonder how far they should have taken it. I've had to do it to people myself.
You hear a lot of those stories. Oh, well, he was playing this wrong, and then this happened, and that happened, and he won the game. And yeah, you've got to just man up and just say, look, if you think something's wrong, just have a little look, have a little check. Ask someone else as well. Ask someone else that's about. How does this work?
Yeah, and it's just a way of doing it. Don't be afraid to ask a judge. If you're sitting there, or whoever's running the event, if you're sitting there thinking, oh no, I really feel it's that way, can we just get someone over just to double check? Most of the time I will say, have you looked it up in the rule book? Because there's a surprising amount of people who haven't. But you've got to be sensible. And sometimes those conversations come because, oh, well, we just wanted to finish the game. We only had half hour left, but you also don't want the game to be salty. You don't want to be put off by it. And the other thing is as well, it's really hard to do. But if that person's been doing that wrong unintentionally for however many months he's been playing the game, and he's going to go on and play all his other opponents the same way, it's like actually you can make their games better as well. And your opponent might actually be, oh, I've been doing it the wrong way all this time. Because generally most of these are mistakes.
Yeah, definitely.
So you can help out like that. That's not something that's easy to do when you're new. But what you can do is just do the individual kind of have a little check for yourself, and have a look. And I think sometimes when you're new, when there's a lot of new stuff, if you're new to the whole scene, as it were, to gaming as well, sometimes you are just going to let things slide. That's not necessarily a major issue, but there are ways of approaching that.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the final real ones are. Remember why you're going to an event. You're going to meet people, you're going to have fun, you're going to play some games, roll some dice. So, in helping do that, remember that if you're new, you might lose a lot. You might not. You might be a half decent player, but not realise kind of what kind of armies are coming, or how certain units are played in different places. And every time I go to an event, I see someone do something different because I'm like, oh, that's a cool way of doing that, actually. Yeah, because that's the way their play group have kind of evolved to play that game. Our group's played with the armies it has in the style it has, and then all of a sudden you get exposed to something new, and you can take that away with you. But if you haven't been playing much, you might be a good player, you might come and smash face. But,
yes. Yeah.
But if you lose, yeah, you lost a game. Great, And that's the advantage of these narrative events, because there's no loser. You don't have to worry about being bottom of the pile. Which no one, even those people who don't mind it, they don't like being bottom of the pile.
Yeah, no one likes getting absolutely smashed every single game.
No, you're coming, the main reasons I game, I enjoy the game, but I come to meet people, like-minded people, have a laugh, play a few games, roll some dice. And part of it is actually playing the game. So yeah, as I say, I experience another army and think, oh, that's a really cool army, actually. I really like the way that works, I might get some of them. Always danger.
Yeah, always a danger.
Particularly with units. Sometimes it's a unit. It's like you see a Derrideo go down for the first time, and then you've got a flyer, and it's like, yeah, that ruined me. Yeah, I might get one of them, take it to the club.
Yeah.
Those little kind of things. Or you might see, say, a Primarch, and people at your club may not normally play with Primarchs. And you actually see this Primarch, see what it does, but start to work out its weaknesses and what you can do, so that when your mate brings a Primarch to the club, you sit there and go, yeah, cool, bro, bring it. I got it. It's all good. Unless it's Russ and you can't shoot him out of his transport. But, it's all part of the fun. So, yeah, there's lots of stuff you can get out of an event. And I think if you're coming to win all your games at a narrative event, then maybe you should take a step back and looking at what events you're going to.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think you got to try and learn from it. It's my big thing. You got to try and learn and experience it, because it's a very different experience to playing at a club per se, and other types of playing with friends, etc. It's a very different environment, and it's something to try and learn. And obviously every event's different as well, so you try and learn what type of event you like.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I would say is if you're going to an event for your first time, try and talk to people. Now, this isn't easy for everybody, because some people don't like, don't feel comfortable going to talk to strangers. But in general, the event organizer you'll probably have had a little bit of contact with. If not, you will have some at the start of the event. When you go up and say hello, my name's here. I'm here for the event. So try, and even if it's only the first opponent you meet, right, go and ask them how well they did in their second game. And all of a sudden you'll start to find that you become part of the group, and you'll find the people you like or you get on with better than others. That's always going to happen. But then you start to build up this other friendship group. Next event you go to, hopefully one or two of them are there. You've automatically got this bond with them. You meet some more people, meet some more friends, and all of a sudden you're part of a community that's a lot bigger than the one you have at home.
Yeah, definitely. And just from going for the few events I've been to, you see the same faces and the same people.
Yeah, I say mainly from Warhammer. I went to Adepticon 3-4 years ago, however long it was. I walked into the Warhammer room, and because Twitter was so big on with Warhammer guys back then, even like 30-40 people in this room I'd kind of conversed with at some point, or knew we were coming over, or what have you. That makes that whole thing so much easier to walk in. And it helped that I was the one of the few English guys over there, which does help identify and everything else, and people very welcoming. But most groups are pretty welcoming. There'll always be the odd person, but sometimes that's me. But most groups are pretty welcoming. And as I say, from running events in the UK, I hate to say it, but I lose track of the names of people now, because people know me from running the events. So it's cool that all these people will come up and chat, and I'll be sitting there going, it's Dan or Steve. I can't remember which one it is. And that's really bad on my part, but I'm not good with huge numbers of names. But it's cool because I recognise the face, and I'll be able to tell you a story about them usually. Maybe not their name. So if I do forget your name, I do apologise. But, when you get 57 people at an event, that's 57 names, and then half of them are at the next event, and then there's some others that you don't know. So, but it's all good. And I've made brilliant friends. I've been able to stay free board and lodging in the US. I've had offers of more free board and lodging if I ever go to Vegas for events. I've had people around Europe saying that as well. And that's all from just being active in the community. And some of that's come from events. And I've met, the crazy thing that's been happening very recently at events is meeting people who live within a 20-mile radius of where I play the game.
Oh, really?
Who never knew that our club existed. All of a sudden they're going to come down to our club and play games. So actually expanding my home club by going to events so many miles away. You know,
wow.
it does happen. It is a small world sometimes, so you never know. So get out there and chat to people. And as I say, you know, sometimes you're going to meet people and think, yeah, I'm not bothered by him. That's fair enough. You know, that's life, isn't it?
Yeah, you're not going to like everyone.
No. So there we go. There's how to be a noob at events.
Yes.
I think maybe. Yeah. Feedback. Give us feedback. Tell us what we missed. Tell us what we got wrong. Tell us how rubbish we were at that.
Yes.
Please do. Please do. That's your challenge, listeners. Awesome. Brilliant. Well, I think we'll leave that there and we'll come back with Michael talking about the Crimson King. Well, Michael's back, and we're going to be chatting about pretty much the latest release in the Horus Heresy series, Crimson King, the long-awaited Crimson King.
That's right, book 44.
Yeah, I know. It's 44, is it? Blimey.
Yeah.
And it's the afterword in the hardback does actually go into a little bit of that kind of long-awaitedness of it, which is quite interesting. Quite good
definitely.
to read. Certainly if you're interested in that kind of thing, to, you know, a little bit of the background of the writers and stuff gives you a little bit of an insight into, some of the challenges, that were going on, within the book.
Challenges definitely sounds like the word based on what Graham wrote there.
Yeah.
But you know, very pleased that it's come out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So, last Black Library Weekender, in fact, so a year and a half ago, I was one of the guys sitting in the bar chatting to him about this book, actually. So it's, you know, it is a long time, and there was certainly some interesting comments. But it's gone through that journey, and it's out, and we both read it, lucky enough to pick it up at Warhammer Fest.
Yep, that's right.
And a few people have read the online version, I'm assuming the ebook version. So, Crimson King, go on then, Michael. Give us a very loose outlay of what the Crimson King's all about.
Well, I guess the first thing that's important to say is this is essentially the follow-on to A Thousand Suns. So anyone who's reading steadily through the series, if you've not read A Thousand Suns, I don't think we'll spoil anything because the events of A Thousand Suns are pretty clear. You know, if you know anything about Heresy, you'd probably be aware of what happens in A Thousand Suns. This follows on. Whether it's immediately afterwards, it sort of doesn't really matter. It follows on thematically, if nothing else, from the climactic end of A Thousand Suns and sees Magnus and his remaining sons, having been transported, I suppose is the right word, to the planet of the sorcerers, the planet within the Eye of Terror, which is shaped by the Legion, shaped by Magnus, and is a sort of very changeable, very Thousand Sunsy place.
Yes.
And I guess it's about a couple of things. It's about the Legion, both Magnus and his sons adjusting to what's happened, dealing with the aftermath, adjusting to how they see themselves, because they've been essentially judged, and they have acknowledged now that the rest of the galaxy sees them as traitors, whatever they see themselves as. But the main thrust of it is that it's about the sons, primarily, really, Ammon and Ahriman, trying to stop Magnus's sort of slide towards his doom, towards his death. And I don't know if we really want to talk about what form that takes.
No, I think, bearing in mind how early this is, I think we'll leave that. There are 3 stories running through this, really. You've got Ammon doing his thing, which is very direct. Ahriman doing his thing, which is slightly more, has to go and do stuff to do that. And then there are obviously some loyalists involved as well. And they're trying to do their thing.
That's right. And some familiar faces alongside some unfamiliar faces from the loyalist perspective. So, it will tie in, or it ties into another one of Graham's books, The Outcast Dead.
More than one. Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, I was reading through it, and it's very Graham McNeil in how many ties there are to other things.
Yeah, definitely.
It's something he does a lot.
He does do a lot, and I see quite a lot of people online not being too keen on it. Personally, I don't have a problem. I think the Heresy is all about that connective tissue. And yes, some of the things that Graham does probably more than others tie in to 40k as well.
Yeah.
Again, I don't have a problem with that. In fact, I think I'll say I like the connective tissue within the Heresy. So I like characters from earlier books coming in. The 40k stuff, just neither here nor there, just is.
Sure.
But yeah, so go for it.
I like it. I think there are a couple of times that Graham does one or two too many, but it doesn't mean I don't like it. But I think sometimes there's just one or two too many characters in a book. But I don't think he's ever gone beyond the line, as it were.
No, fair enough.
That's my take on it. Sometimes I think, you didn't need that one, as it were, without it having a negative effect on the story.
I think for me the most interesting ones, though, the links to other things in this book are actually as a result of how much I absolutely love John French's Ahriman series.
Yeah.
And there are some characters, some overtly linked between the two series. And there's one or two that are really little sort of subtle nudges that you'll only know if you've read all of the Ahriman books. Now, Ahriman is sort of loosely set, that series, not relatively speaking that long after the Heresy, so they're not in contemporary 40k. So the characters, if you've read the Ahriman series, are not that dissimilar here in The Crimson King to how they are in John's work, which I think is really cool. I really like that.
Yeah, I haven't finished the Ahriman series, so I'm a little bit blinded on those.
Yep,
those
fair
links.
enough. But I guess that one thing is worth pointing out is that, as with all the Heresy stuff, there is quite a large dramatist personae at the front. If you get hold of a copy in the shops or get your hands on one way or another, having a scan through will quite quickly show you if you have read some of these other books, sort of go, oh, that's cool. This guy, I remember these guys. I did, however, have to, before I read it, go, you know what? There are some characters in here that were in 1,000 Suns that I think I know where they were at the end, but I can't remember how they got there. So I just went on Lexicanium, however you say that, on the website, and just looked up these characters' names and just skimmed their pages, because they haven't obviously they hadn't a couple of weeks ago been updated with the results of this book, and I don't imagine they will for a while. So that helped me just refresh my memory a little bit, because what I didn't want to do was go back and reread 1,000 Suns, because if I reread 1,000 Suns, I'll probably want to reread Prospero Burns as well. And I was like, this is going to take too long. I want to get onto this.
Sure.
For me, having just that little refresher was a really good thing. I don't know if you did. I don't know what other people will have done, but I found that helped.
I don't look at the Dramatis Persona pages.
Oh, really? Okay.
No. So things like Scars, the end of Scars was wasn't telegraphed for me because I don't read it. I can't remember. Actually, is that a bad choice? Was that one not mentioned? But there are a couple of things where by not reading it, I do get a little bit of a surprise as to what's going on, which I like. That's my way of doing films and books and everything. It's like, if I know I'm going to read it, I don't read anything about it.
That's really interesting, actually. Essentially treating the Dramatis Personae as not a spoiler, as a trailer.
Yeah, but no, it is a spoiler.
In the same way.
Because if I read a book and it says, I don't know, Dawn turns up, and I'm 3/4 of the way through the book, and then there's like a building tension in that book, then I'm expecting Dawn to turn up in that book. So it's a sort of spoiler. And I know I'm a little bit extreme in the way I do this now, because I do it. I will turn over adverts on TV for films that I know I'm going to watch, because having done it now for a few years, it's really hard to go into a film or read a book and truly not know and allow the story to unfold without any preconceived ideas.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree.
It creates if you don't do it, if you're one of those people who likes to find out, try it on a film and see how you like it. You might not like it, but I remember, I think it was particularly something like World's End, the film. All I'd seen was like the pictures of them walking, like standing with pints or walking down the street as a gang, and I knew it had aliens in it, and that was it. So when the twist happened, it was like, oh, that was awesome. You know?
Yeah, that's really cool. I had something similar. I know we're going off topic a little bit. Nick Vincent, Dan Abnett's wife, recently published a book earlier this year, maybe?
Yeah.
End of last year? I can't quite remember, called Savant. I think actually under Nick Abnett. But check it out. It's a really interesting book. But I completely blew my mind. I was reading it because I got it as an ebook, and I hadn't read the synopsis, and I just got stuck into it. And I was 2/3 of the way through, going, I have absolutely no idea what's going on here. This is brilliant. This is amazing world building. I'm hooked on this, but I just don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And that made it really interesting. It made it incredibly difficult to review. But it was very interesting. So yeah,
it's
Savant by Nick Abnett. Definitely check it out.
Let's get it straight. It doesn't always affect you like that.
No.
But imagine watching like specific films, things like what's it called? Dawn. Tarantino.
From Dusk Till Dawn.
From Dusk Till Dawn. Imagine watching that and not knowing what you were watching.
Yeah.
Right, and that so early on will just flip you and kind of what's going on. So it again, mileage varies, but that's why I don't read the dramatis persona. Unfortunately, there are a couple of times then through the book where I was like, "Who's that? What does he do?" And I can flick back and try and look for some of them, but it can cause problems the other way, as you say. As I say, in fact, I had to text you and was like. Because it's fair to say, right from early on, Lucius is in this book.
Yes.
And if you're going to read this, I suggest you listen to, what's it called?
I think it's Lucius the Eternal Blade, or the Eternal Blade Master. I can't quite remember. It is in one of the Heresy anthologies. Something like Legacies of Betrayal.
Right.
Maybe. So it's either the audio drama. It's about a 15, 20-minute audio drama, or the micro shorts.
Yeah.
I think it's Legacies of Betrayal, not 100%. And absolutely, it goes some way towards explaining why Lucius is in a nominally a Thousand Sons book.
Yes, and just needed as soon as you mentioned, I remember listening to that now. And there's been some discussion online about his job in the book. And bear with me, about his role in this book. At the end of the day, he was at that point. He was in that position at this point, so he has to be brought back to where he needs to be. So this is probably the best book to do that, because having read someone say, "Oh, he shouldn't have been in it," you would be more annoyed, I think, if you read a book in 4 books' time and he appears completely somewhere else, and they'd say, "Oh, he just travelled here."
Definitely. And now I think I'm with you. I don't have a problem with Lucius being in this. I think he serves a couple of purposes. I think he adds a little bit of comic relief. You might not expect that, but he does. The Thousand Sons take themselves very seriously.
Yes, they do.
So there's not a lot of natural opportunity for humour in a book featuring these guys. And Lucius is so deadpan, and he really is the quite opposite sort of character to most of the Thousand Sons. And he adds an interesting element. He adds something that's a little bit different. But one other thing that's really cool is exactly what you said. So Lucius has to get to where he needs to be, I think, physically, as in locationally, but he also has to get there sort of psychologically. And there's some interesting things that go on here, and sort of giving some time to think about it. Having seen, like you did, some people talking about it online, I sort of thought, actually, if you think about, again, I don't want to spoil this, but if you think about where he ends up, literally where he ends up, the last time you see him, I think there's some really interesting speculation there about what he's actually going to go and do next. That I'm really keen to see the next time we see him in the series, because maybe I'm completely wrong, but it's quite cool what I'm thinking. And I look forward to seeing if that's the case or not.
Yeah, I think Lucius is one of those characters who's... we've had discussions with authors, and it's clear we're coming to the beginning of the end of the Heresy. However long that takes. However, it's still a limited time, and there are a great number of characters to kind of get their stories told, and we know that some of them aren't going to be finished within the main series of these books. Now, you would think that those characters who've been around a long time, who are fairly important to the history of 40k as well, would get some of that airtime at least. So we're looking at people like Khan, Lucius. You would hope you find out all about Abaddon and those people as well. And Lucius is one of those people who probably deserves to have most of his story told in the Heresy, in those numbered books.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who doesn't want to see him at the Siege of Terror?
No, absolutely.
He needs to be there. And I'm pretty sure I saw someone basically complaining that he was a dick. I mean, he is. That's the point of Lucius. He's not likable. But in contrast with the Thousand Suns, he sort of is.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed some scenes with him, because he's just this really interesting foil to the, like I said, very serious, sort of mystical, slightly pretentious characters in the Thousand Suns. But also he's a devotee by some point of Slanesh, the sort of the god of excess and temptation, and that sort of ties in a little bit with what he does, what he achieves, that sense of temptation. So I think if you don't like cameos, you don't like cameos.
Yeah.
But he's not in it that much. I thought it was very interesting that this particular discussion that I saw, I think we're talking about the same one, was heavily focused on why he's in the book, not what else is going on in the book.
Yeah.
He's, let's make this clear, he is not a driving force behind the narrative of this novel.
But he's utilised. He's utilised, as you say, to do a number of things. There's a number of actions he takes which allows other things to happen. But also, as you say, there are times when this guy who's not particularly nice, no one should really be listening to him, when he can see that people are taking a wrong path. Like, at that point, you've got to stand up and take notice. It's like, hold on.
That's right.
That bloke thinks that we're like, this shouldn't be happening, or this should be happening. It's like, whoa, if he's going to think that. So yeah, there is a role there. During the book, I maybe didn't appreciate it quite as much as when I reviewed the book in my head. So yeah, he's cool. And there's a couple of things he does, and there's always questions and what have you. I think his character was misread by a few people as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I think a few people take him as, okay, it's Lucius the Blade Master, blah, 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 and that's all he is. And there was certainly one point in this where he's not a nice person. And if he knows he's going to be able to beat someone, he will drag it out until he gets bored. That is what he does. That is him trying to get sensation, and he, just to prove he's better than people, he will do that. And there's certainly one fight in this where it's like, oh, we should have just killed that person. And it's like, well, no, the whole point was he was like, oh, come on, little man. And he's going to toy, like a cat would toy with a mouse.
Yeah.
That's what he would do. And, he is, without being the complete archetype, he is the evil villain who will allow you a chance to escape because he's so up himself. But he's cool. He's cool. I like that.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I think he's dominated a lot of the discussion about this so far, which I think is slightly a shame, because Magnus is a huge focus of this. It is the Crimson King. It is about Magnus. We don't get to see a huge amount from his perspective. Like, for me, the driving force behind it was the sort of yin and yang, if you want to think of it like that way, of Ahriman and Ammon. So Ahriman is the favoured son. Ammon is, in my head, the loyal son. Ammon stays by his father's side, and he does. He's there through thick and thin. Ahriman is sent off to do stuff, but I don't think Ahriman would have stayed if it had been the other way around. If he'd been expected to stay by Magnus' side, he wouldn't have done.
Yeah, Ammon is willing to do what needs to be done under orders and for the betterment of his father. Araman will try and fix his father because he feels that it can be really helpful. But also, while I do this, there's stuff I can do here. And that plays a big part into it. And there is a fair amount of foreshadowing, as you say, to the Araman series with that and events that occur outside those books.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is dark, isn't it? We're not seeing the Thousand Sons at their peak. If you've read the Magnus the Red Primarch's book, I read that immediately before the Crimson King, because I thought this is going to be a really nice way to get myself back into the Thousand Sons feel. And it's the fact. I mean, it's not even the Thousand Sons at their peak, but that book is all about hope and the slight, the change in hope. But it's the Thousand Sons are clean and fresh faced. And vibrant. Here, they're battered. They're struggling to figure out what's going on. They are wrestling with so many demons. This is dark, dark stuff. And I think that's reflected in the tone and the themes that goes with the book, but it's also reflected in the narrative. It's twisty. It's a bit like the Araman series. There's all sorts of mad warp influenced sort of crazy stuff. And interestingly, in my review on Track of Words, I was talking about how I feel like, I didn't, but I feel like people might get a bit lost in that middle bit, because there is a lot of Ammon and Araman doing their own thing, and it all goes a bit mad, bit weird. And I think you found a little bit like that, didn't you?
Yeah. While I didn't not enjoy it, it was sometimes a little bit almost like work to get through those bits, because also you've got Magnus, who's not his full cognitive self at this point as well. So in one storyline you have time travel, wibbly wobbly timey wimey, demons and weird stuff going on, and then in the other one you've got at one point Ammon and Magnus flying through the ether, and then crazy stuff going on with that as well. Plus time is not running normally because they are deep in the warp, which is how it should be. And it was, for me, it was a little bit like, hold on. And that might have been circumstance of how I was reading it and everything as well. But as I say, it wasn't that I didn't enjoy it. It just took me a little bit of work to enjoy it, as it were.
Yeah. I think that's really fair. I mean, as I was reading it, I was thinking, I can imagine people thinking, feeling that way. And hands up, completely honest, I'm a huge Thousand Sons fan. I devour all of this stuff. And I really like the bonkers warp stuff. Like that bit you're mentioning with Ammon, at one point I literally stopped and went, what? Hang on a minute. But once I got my head around it, and went, okay, I'm pretty sure it's this. And, for me, it's just, I just need that moment to go, got it.
Yeah.
Keep going.
To be honest, I might not have done that. I might have been trying to read the book too quickly. I might have, as in sometimes you do sit back and process something, and that helps. But I mean, the whole book isn't that. Certainly Magnus is, where Magnus appears, that's a lot more because of what's going on. Because right from the start, they are really struggling with what happened, on Prospero. And in fact, when you look at, the way people talk about how Magnus and him escaping on Prospero, there is a line in the book and it's like, you don't realise how badly the wolves hurt us. And it's like, they really did. They really did. And that's very much this book is like, how are they going to recover? And when they do recover, what are they going to do?
Definitely. I think that hangs over the whole thing really interestingly.
Yeah.
That sense that, they've not had chance to become bitter about it. They're still trying to process it. But there's this, it's not, it can't be fear, but there's just this sense of, whoa, like what's happened? It's like there's the sort of executioner's axe hanging above their heads, which I think again adds to that sort of dark, menacing tone, adds to that sense of uncertainty about what's going to happen. But like you said, we need to get from the end of the Thousand Sons to we know the Thousand Sons were at the Siege of Terror. There needs to be something to talk at greater or lesser length about how they get from A to B. And this does that to a certain extent.
It certainly sets up their approach to terror, however they do that. It gets them through the mental process. What was really interesting is by the end of the book, I'm not going to say what decision, but the way Magnus approached what they then had to do was not fully what I expected. And I thought that was very well done, actually, by Graham. And I also feel that in general, that whole book actually, while it showed the strength of the Thousand Sons, really opened up a lot of their weaknesses, to the point where, you know, some of them were questioning what they'd been up to. And I felt Thousand Sons did this as well. And I feel that a lot of people read Thousand Sons and didn't quite fully understand how Magnus appreciated he'd screwed up.
Yeah. Totally.
And in this, there's a few other characters who are really questioning who they are, what the Legion is, and everything else. Obviously, Ahriman is certainly not one of them, because this is a Space Marine filled with so much self-belief and kind of assumption that he is right and whatever he does is the best, which is brilliant and shows you just all the problems that Ahriman has for any time Ahriman's written.
Oh yeah, totally. That way you see Ahriman in this, he's really changed from Thousand Sons Ahriman. He's started down this path, and you talked before about foreshadowing. There's a lot of that. If someone reads this and enjoys it, and you haven't yet read Ahriman Exile, go read that. That is then a completely different Ahriman again.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting. This character's arc is brilliant. Ahriman is evil. He is the bad guy. He's one of the bad guys to end all bad guys by 40k. But you hear a lot of people talking about the Thousand Sons did nothing wrong, and they're still loyal and all this sort of stuff. And that to me is what makes the Thousand Sons so interesting. That everyone has this different opinion on, how much did they cross the line? Did they cross the line at all? Are they still loyal? All that sort of stuff. And I think Graham's done a really good job in both these books of sort of taking that and not trying to give a definitive answer. There's nothing in here that you're not going to put it down and go, got it. Now I get why they're seen the way they are seen.
No,
not going to get that.
I think it certainly opens up ways to talk about it, and the perspectives are different with the different characters. As you say, Ahriman will never believe he's evil, because Ahriman always believes he's doing the right thing no matter what. And to a certain extent, up to a point, he is. He's just gone too far. Yeah, Ahriman has no boundaries. It's just like, it'll be fun. But one of those issues is his arrogance, because he feels that he can do anything and control it, and doesn't appreciate, like, at no point does he think, what if I can't control it? It's like, it's such an alien thought to him, which is quite funny. And that, part of that, well, a great deal of that came from Magnus. And there are points in this where Magnus looks at himself and was like, what did I do there?
Oh, definitely. There's some really interesting stuff with Magnus, especially with at least one of his brothers. A little bit of introspection that maybe we might not have expected. And certainly a way of acting around and talking about and seeing other Primarchs that we've not really seen before. Magnus he's colossally arrogant in one sense, but in his interactions with other Primarchs, we've not really seen that before. He tends to show the side of his personality that's benevolent, and sort of fatherly almost. Yeah. Not all the time in this. Yeah. There's one particular bit that, if you're a Thousand Sons fan, especially, you'll probably go, "Oh, that was cool." Oh, why didn't he just do this one thing? Those sort of things.
Yeah, definitely. There's, when we talk about the Primarchs having these flaws that are also hyped up, one of Magnus's key ones is naivety. It's astounding kind of sometimes how blind he is, but that's because of his confidence as well, and his desire and his willing to do good. All these mixed together to create this character who it's because sometimes you sit there and think, how can you get yourself in this situation? But when you actually kind of break it down, you're like, yeah, I can understand that now.
Yeah, definitely. And for Magnus, naivety and arrogance go hand in hand. They're almost like a circle. One feeds the other. There is a short story by John French, and I forget what it's called. There are 3 all about Magnus. So anyone who's not read John's Iron Man series, there's a book as well called Iron Man Exodus, which is a collection of short stories. 5 or 6, something like that, are about a character called Theseus, and 3 are about Magnus. And I think the first one is essentially Magnus reliving, perhaps, a really early memory where essentially he meets the Chaos Gods. And there's this point where he says, I know who you are. And that point, it is just that crossing, that intersection of naivety and arrogance right from the beginning.
It's dangerous mix.
Really dangerous. And you see that and you just go, oh, hang on a minute. He really doesn't quite have this right.
No. A Magnus without the naivety or with a toned down confidence would have led to a very different universe because of the power and the position he then would have. It's very cool, very cool.
Definitely. There is, in fact, a line in here where someone basically says to another character, and imagine what would have happened if this hadn't happened. Just think how good that would have been. And the other character, to his credit, accepts that, acknowledges it. It doesn't do that blinkered sort of black and white thing that some characters we see really do, because we as readers are seeing the Heresy like more and more, right from the beginning, as shades of grey, not black and white. Characters within it, if you're not Malcador and you're not those sort of guys, it's black and white. You're the bad guy, I'm the good guy, or vice versa.
Yeah, we probably should mention there are some loyalist forces in here, and some of them are Space Wolves, and they are a really interesting group of characters, and they have some of the more black and white views, although they do bend at times, as the Space Wolves often do. But there are key moments in this where they almost turn on their own. And there's some really interesting kind of discussions around that as well. So there's some. It's not just we're seeing it all from the Thousand Sons point of view here. There are some other aspects going on as well, and I really enjoyed those Space Wolf characters.
Yeah, I think like all the best Heresy books, there's a mix of viewpoints. By which I mean, it's not just Space Marines. The Heresy, right from the outset, if it hadn't been handled in that opening trilogy the way it was, could have ended up being a series about Space Marines and nothing but Space Marines. Which, fine, but having the human viewpoint, I think the majority of us will acknowledge is a good thing. And there are some humans in here as well as Space Marines, of interesting origin and interesting viewpoint. And I really don't want to say too much.
An interesting legacy as well.
Yes, very interesting legacy will turn out to be. But yeah, they just give that other perspective. And not everyone likes that point you mentioned with Lucius. Not everyone sort of saw eye to eye with that particular involvement. But, it is what it is. I think the Heresy needs to have that. It needs to have different perspectives. And especially in something where you've got Thousand Sons, the Space Wolves make sense to be in it, but it's not all Space Wolves. And then having the other sort of human characters just adds a nice element. And I think that the book ends up very rounded because of that. It's big book. This is one of the longest, must be one of the longest Heresy books. Maybe isn't quite Vengeful Spirit length, but that was huge. But certainly on the shelf, I think the new square binding makes it either that or the page size or something like that makes it slightly difficult to tell. But it certainly is a bit of a monster. But I think it tells a pretty rounded tale, all told.
Yeah, I think there is a lot going on. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There's actually not, although there are a lot of characters, they are it's groups of characters interacting. And there are stories to be told that obviously are going to lead elsewhere. I say we're at that point in the stories now where it's very hard to have a fully standalone book. But it does actually quite well. If you've only read Thousand Suns and you read this, it's going to make sense. But there are a lot of things in there which lead into, I could see certain books coming now that maybe I hadn't seen quite as obviously before. So it's cool. Yeah. Short stories, at least.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, most of these novels do feed into other things, don't they, and do generate those other stories. I think to add to that, you mentioned you could comfortably just read Thousand Suns and straight into this. I hope people don't take that as being, well, this is a side story then. It's Thousand Suns, they're not really in the Heresy anymore. We don't really need to do that. It's not moving the plot further on. I hate people talking about this. It's become something that doesn't mean anything anymore. This idea of, it's not moving the narrative on. Well, I mean, you don't know because the narrative hasn't finished, and you'll see more once it's finished. We will see more of how it all fits together. But anyway, my bugbear notwithstanding, actually I think this does a really good job of, carrying on the Thousand Suns story and taking them off in that direction, but also pulling it back in. And like I said before, the way that this sort of ends up explaining a little bit about what's going to happen next. Yes, it is fundamentally a Thousand Suns story, and it's not got vast swathes of other legions in and that sort of stuff. But I think this is going to be really quite important. Arguably, just even a small bit quite near the end, where you sort of go, that's interesting. That then I feel like is going to open up some possibilities of how they fit in and how other things happen as the series comes to a close. So it's not a side story. This is not one that, like, if you only want to read the main arcs, still read this.
Yeah, I think those people, particularly one person who makes that claim, would be very quick if we moved to Terra in 3 books, would be very quick to say, oh, hold on, how did they get here? I think that is a big thing. These stories need to be told to be able to tell the final stories without having to do flashbacks or just weird exposition to get characters into place. This is a key moment for probably actually, 2 or 3 forces to be kind of either allowed to be set up or to reach the point of setup. So it's it had to be done. It had to be done, and we've known that, to be honest. You also need to do justice to the Thousand Suns in the series, bearing in mind some of the legions who don't appear a huge amount have had like a few stories. The Thousand Suns have basically had one.
One that's dedicated to them, where they've appeared. It's just been in small doses up until this point, hasn't it?
And, this is, we know that Magnus, we know where he ends up, and it would do a real injustice if it was just, Russ beat him up, so he turned to Chaos.
Yeah.
Now, that would be really poor, and people would be furious if that had happened. And what we've got is a much more nuanced story that has yet to be finished. So that's cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think overall, I think this is going to be seen as a strong book. There will be people who pick holes with it. There are people who pick holes in anything, and that's fine because you're entitled to that. I am arguably slightly biased because I really like The Thousand Suns, but I genuinely think it's a great book. I think Graham's a great storyteller. You take away even the criticisms that people lay at his door. You take that away. He's crafted a really interesting story here that is surprisingly complex, I think, when you boil it down to Magnus isn't very well. He sends his son to go out and fix it. Stuff happens. Really, that's the gist. Sends one son out to go and find stuff. The other one tries to keep him going.
It's almost like an old like mythical quest.
Yeah, totally.
Like a Greek quest story. And it's a simple premise with plenty of twists and turns and things along the way. I very much have the Graham books I like, and the Graham books I'm not so much a fan of. I don't think they're necessarily bad, just not a fan of. And this is certainly not in there, but it's not up near Fulgrim or that for me. This is, in the middle top area, which is not a bad place to be, and someone has to be there at the end of the day. I think coming off the back of the books that I've read, I would, it wouldn't make the top 10 for me for sure. Where I would put it, I don't know, but that's not to say it's a bad book. Particularly, actually, with having not read the latest collections of shorts that have come out. My last books have been Praetorian of Dawn, Path of Heaven, The Master of Mankind. And I'm like, any book following those three is going to struggle.
Yeah, I mean, those are hard acts to follow. There's no doubt about that.
That does influence how you perceive the next book. There's no doubt about that. We approach all these books with these preconceptions and weights and measures in our minds, even if we don't think we do. So,
that's fair.
That's good. Anything else about it before we kind of...
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've covered quite a lot there. It's the sort of thing that the Thousand Sons arc is really interesting, so maybe sometime down the line we'll go into it in a bit more detail. It would be really good fun to do it, to look at the Thousand Sons from A Thousand Sons, Crimson King, whatever we see next, and then the Ahriman series.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the sort of thing, people would be interested in that. I'd quite enjoy that, so that's maybe something we could look at some point in the future.
Well, it's definitely something we could do with, say, not just the Thousand Sons. There's plenty of opportunity for that kind of thing. So that sounds pretty cool to me, actually. Sounds like a bit of homework's needed, though.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Brilliant. Well, in which case, I think we can wrap it up there. I think, the Crimson King is a win.
Definitely.
Definitely. So it's been a long time coming, which I don't think helps people's judgment, because they build it up in their heads to be this great masterpiece, and it's like, well, is it ever going to live up to what we make in our head, what the ideas we have in our heads? Dubious as to whether it ever could. But it's, it does a number of jobs well, and surprising as well, throwing in things that very much I didn't think of, consider when reading this book.
That's cool.
Yep, and building up towards the end, whenever that may be.
Yeah, can't wait.
No, it's going to be awesome. All right, okay. Well, we'll leave that there. We'll got no idea what we're going to talk about next time, so we'll have a chat offline.
I'm sure we'll think of something.
There's always something to do. And, brilliant. Cheers for joining us.
Thank you.
That's it. Right, so we're into the second main topic of the show, which is competitive gaming in the Heresy. This has come about in part for, a couple of reasons, really. One, people have talked to me about competitive events, and I've seen there is one being run at the end of November. And I've seen other tournaments being run, smaller tournaments as well. But also, regularly events we see different power levels of armies, and some that are very much more towards the kind of competitive edge.
We've seen those players that have come over to Heresy as well that are maybe competitive 40k players, and they're looking for something maybe new and different, and they are bringing tougher lists.
Yeah, and there's a lot of issues kind of that kind of appear when this is mentioned. And so we're trying to kind of avoid that. It does cause some friction in the hobby because people perceive this as almost a historical game, future historical game, and a lot of people want to the concept for some people is to maintain a certain level of storytelling within the system and narrative within the system. Now, there are various issues with that in and of itself. And if they see something that they consider to be hard, then it's kind of perceived to be against what the Heresy is. which is an interesting concept, really, because of the nature of the way the game's written, it allows it. So, first thing I did was on Facebook the other day, I asked what is the hobby to people. I didn't ask it very well, actually. We got generally, it's playing the game, it's painting the models, and it's hanging out with friends. That's a lot of it. It's the background and everything else. But more than once, the word like tactics or strategy came up.
Right, yeah.
And I really feel that the first thing I feel is there's not a distinction. There's not two camps here between narrative and competitive. There is a sliding scale of the two. And in fact, it's not even a sliding scale because they can actually
a lot of competitive players would probably say that they're narrative players as well.
Yeah, it's almost more like a Venn diagram, You've got the different sections of it, and some people fit all three parts of that. So, yeah, just because an army list is competitive doesn't mean that it breaks the narrative. And again, personal kind of judgments are made over what is competitive, what is narrative, what is, what have you. Essentially, you can write a load of stories. You can make a lot of armies narrative if you want to. Again, it might not be that classic narrative. And some people are diehard. They only want to see Imperial Fists in gold, yellow. They only want to see, them defending walls. They don't want to see them riding forwards and doing stuff like that. And it's like, well, that's the more narrow end of narrative. Whereas, again, we got these legions, they can do all kinds of stuff. They have different colour schemes. They have everything like that. Some people don't want that. Some people do. So, right from that point, you've got this discussion over what is narrative. And then you take that through at every stage to what is competitive.
I've played plenty of people which you can be. I think there is a difference between you get the people that really play hardcore, trying to make absolutely the most of every point and every advantage, and there's people that are more competitive in the sense that they just want to play with the best of their ability with what they've got or what they've set out with, and haven't tried to manufacture it as much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There are certain armies which really lend themselves. Now, all the rights of war, all the legions are designed to play well according to the style of the classic style of their legion. Yeah. So it's almost built that way anyway. Or certain aspects of it are for sure. When we add in, other things like custodies and whatever, it changes the mix up. Again, a lot of people's problems with Mechanicum is that they stand out a lot, but actually is part of that down to the fact that they run against the natural meta of Space Marine on Space Marine, all that kind of stuff. But essentially, I think a lot of it comes down to what is narrative gaming. Now, when people are prepared to call out competitive gamers, it makes me kind of laugh when then they do stuff in their game which is trying to win. Because that is all a competitive gamer does sometimes. When you play World Eaters, do you just try and charge everything no matter what? Do you just move towards the closest unit because that's what they might do? When you play, I don't know, whatever. When you're doing White Scars, you're always going to be moving at full speed just because that's what White Scars do. Not always. Sometimes you're going to move away. Sometimes you're going to play against maybe the story that you've got going. Well, some people will. Some people won't. Some people, I know plenty of people for 40k and Heresy who are like, oh, it's a really bad idea, but yet my Praetor would charge Horus. Yes. And it is. It's a terrible idea 99% of the time. And there are a few, and there's only a few people who would go, no, that's what he'd do. He's charging. I think most people will go, no, I'll back up and do this and this and this and try and survive for a turn. How many times we see, if you break a game down, the average game, there's a lot of stuff going on there that's quite abstract. It just wouldn't happen if you look at it the way you look at a game of toy soldiers. So does that mean that, those people who don't do that kind of forward charge aren't as narrative? They've made the narrative list. They believe to be a narrative list. It's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I think for me there is, I think the people, it's one of those things where people that probably say they're more narrative players, probably can sit on their high horse a bit when they comes to play games and use that as a bit of a weapon against other people, because I can see where people are coming from, because I can see a lot of it's about the story. It's about, the hobby being, collecting and painting and all the books that we have that sort of back everything up. But also, as we always discuss with the diversity of the universe that everything's set in, there is no reason why these competitive lists would not exist. And how you can't make that into a good narrative if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I think there is a section. I think it's small. I think most people aren't on that high horse, but there certainly are people who do like to look down on others. Oh, I play very, very blah, blah, blah. But if you're doing that, your Iron Warriors player can go, yeah, well, it's quite legitimate for me to bring 9 quad mortars, a load of tanks, blah, blah, blah. And actually, someone will have a go at them and they'll say, well, no, I've got a siege army. I've taken a siege force. That is what that siege force does. My issue, actually, is not necessarily the competitiveness. It's usually the player experience. So there's a terminology that's put around, and it's about whether it's a negative play experience for your opponent. So this actually can come in any form of a game, and to me is much more important than balance or anything else like that. I don't mind losing if I have fun. Now, I've seen the Armoured Companies, Armoured Breakthrough Right of War being talked about as being, competitive. But actually, again, it's if you want to use it the way it's kind of designed to be used as actually a breakthrough force and the tanks are moving forwards, you're telling a story. It's very narrative. Is it always a good experience to play against? No. Sometimes for some armies it's actually quite a negative game experience. And then that becomes an issue of, well, yeah, it was just too hard, I couldn't face it. Well, it's like, well, is it too hard? Because it's got some hard counters, just because X army doesn't do well against it, Y army smashes it. Does that make something competitive? Or does it make it, just match-up dependent? So there's a lot of different things.
We've seen a lot of those lists sort of appear, and we like the night lists and things where you can have that negative experience if you do play against it. And it can be, one of those ones where people don't want to play it. But then I think I was talking to Johnny from the Sons of Heresy, and I was talking to him about his army, because I said, demons aren't particularly tough, but he referred to it as self-regulation. You don't have to make your army super duper hard, but you will expect then you probably will lose a good portion of your games.
Yeah, and who wants to lose all the time? At the end of the day, this is a game, and people come, and I see it from narrative people as well as competitive people, they try hard to win the game they're in. I don't see any problem with that, and I'm running these narrative events. Yeah?
Yes.
Now, if someone overstepped the mark and there was some dubious action going on, that's a completely different story. But if you're playing within the rules to win the game, and your opponent's having fun, you're engaging with them, then, where's the downside in that? And that can actually be done, again, where a lot of people look at certain armies and say that's a competitive army or something. The amount of times it's done with a balanced army, because again, players don't understand that skill level takes a lot of this, and I think a lot of people do overrate their skill level. which is a classic. So you get, I couldn't have done anything in that game. Well, yeah, running your scouts into a bunch of Terminators was not the best idea, mate. Yeah. But you get people like that. And again, we're talking in generals here, and we're not talking about everyone. There are small portions doing that. So what we then get is we get a narrative event where one or two people are being pulled out for being competitive. Sometimes it's deserved. Sometimes you get people at the event who are pushing the limits, who do want to go and win and want to smash up. And that's the way they came. And again, I'm viewing competitive as not a dirty word. It's a play style. And we are looking at different play styles.
Yes.
So there becomes an answer then, should we have competitive events on the scene? Now, when I was asked about it, I said, well, this podcast is not about competitive gaming. So, there are other podcasts. Again, you see it on other podcasts when they talk about lists. And the podcast, regularly through a podcast, they'll say it's not about winning and it's not about this and it's not about that. When they come to review a list, all of a sudden they've shaved all the chaff out of it and they've replaced all those units with something that's better.
Yes.
It's like, well, all you're doing there is creating a more competitive list. Now, not all podcasts do this again, it's a bit of a joke, but you do hear it a lot, and it's a natural form for a lot of gamers as well. Because, no one wants to lose. Yeah. Even those people who don't mind losing still want to try and win. No, they play to win, but it might not be the top concern.
Yeah, I think what your comments that we've discussed earlier is quite viable, where you say to people, they say, oh, well, I'm not a competitive player, and then you just talk about their own. Well, I wouldn't take that unit; it's rubbish.
Yeah.
And it's a case of, well, if you're judging on how good it is in the game, you're effectively playing competitively, and that falls into the subject of pretty much most people that you would ever play the game. You're playing to win, so there is an element of how competitive you are, but the key element is how much you regulate that. To allow your opponent to have fun as well. If you're looking to strip every bit of fun out of it for your opponent so you could win, then you are at probably the top scale of playing competitively.
Yeah, I mean, there is a case to be made where this unit's not even fun to use. I put it down and it dies. There is a case to be said for that. Thankfully, with the new book, there are less units like that now. But, that's always a problem with a game like this. So, as I say, I was approached and it was like, well, this podcast doesn't promote competitive gaming. So, if I were to run an event, it would be Greg Dan of the Imperial Truth running this event. And all of a sudden I'm running a competitive event. Does that sit well with me, having a podcast which has, a weak form of brand, but it does have a brand? Is that right? Does that fit? And I we chatted about it, and the guy here very much said, very much was of the opinion that, if you don't play well in the right manner, you shouldn't be able to win that competitive event, to make sure that the attitude wasn't, a kill or be killed scenario, but to allow players who like that bit of edge to their games to go somewhere and play. And actually, why not?
Yeah, I think it often does come round on often how you structure the awards, or how you judge people how you grade the tournament, I think, effectively. Like in previous events, you haven't actually given out prizes for, the person who's won the most victory points or won the most games. It's been done on a different basis, which sort of then detracts people from just trying to, bring the dirtiest, filthiest army they can think of. Whereas if you are going to do it on a much more, Swiss paired up system, and you're actually going to keep track of how many victory points everyone's got, then you are going more down that road, aren't you?
Yeah, but there's even ways within that. So Games Workshop ran the Open at the Warhammer Fest, the Heresy Open, and actually, I think in general, because it was a Games Workshop event, it still had a bit of that attitude of people are like, oh cool, this is going to be one of my 2 Games Workshop events this year, let's go and have a laugh, which you get in Warhammer World. But there are certainly in the 40k, the guys who ran the London 40k GT, a couple of them were playing in the 40k Open there, and they were trying to win it. And the Age of Sigmar was, there were a handful of very competitive players in that. And I saw some Horus Heresy games where there was a definite difference in approach to the game. And the other thing, the issue they had at that event was to get the big win, you had to crush your opponent, which is sometimes seen as a good way of differentiating, like, the levels of victory to get a true winner. However, it can also lead to, sorry mate, I can't let my foot off the pedal because I want the big win. So, the guy's already losing, and then you're trying to pound them more because you need to get those extra whatever you need to do to get that major win. So it was an interesting thing. So because it's a GW ran event, I felt that event, particularly with the Heresy, avoided a huge amount of those issues. We got this big event going on in Stockport, held at Element Games, end of November, which is going to be like up to 80, 100 player, full-on competitive Horus Heresy event, Swiss drawn. Loyalists can play loyalists, traitors can play traitors. Now, it will be interesting to see how many players attend that.
Yes.
Not in a snide way or anything. I am genuinely interested to see what kind of appeal there is. Because if you get 80 players who want to go and play that, then that obviously shows there's a need or a desire or, for events where competitive gaming is rewarded. Now, if those people can't go and get competitive games in an environment like that to win a trophy, well, they're going to want to go to narrative events because they're the only other ones. Because these guys don't, it's not like most of them aren't there for only one reason. Even like the top of the Age of Sigmar, like the rankings, that the best players in that, and for Warhammer Fantasy for years, were people who were very involved in the hobby, had really good looking armies. A lot of them knew the fluff, knew all the background, the lore, really invested in it, and could play the game. So why are we penalising people for one part of that? So it might call that we do need a few more competitive style events out as a community out there, if only to allow those people to go to them as a release. Because what you might find is, I do my 3 competitive events a year and then I do 2 narrative events a year. Because I get my kicks in that one, I can approach this one in a very different manner.
Yeah, because it could be a case of, some players are going, well, I've been to 3 narrative events. I'm actually looking for something different for my next event. People can get, could maybe get a bit tired of it.
Oh, I think a lot of players every now and then like to go, you know what, let's go. Let's gloves off and let's just have a proper smash down and see. Yeah,
I've got a friend who regularly plays 40k, and he says he has an opponent that he plays regularly, and after a couple of games that they first played, it was clear that it was all getting a bit heated and a bit nasty when they were sort of like, making decisions and not allowing someone to go back. So now they always have a discussion and say, is this a friendly game or is this a competitive game? And there's that element of, well, sometimes you just want a friendly, let's roll some dice, let's have a bit of fun game. But sometimes you do fancy, let's see how let's really take the gloves off and let's see what you're made of.
Yeah. And then there are ways of stopping that getting out of hand in an event. As I say, your sports score, your best game votes, or however you're doing that you can have them to a point where they influence who can win the tournament or not. And so immediately people have to think, hold on, if I act like a prat, then I'm not going to be able to win. Now, you then have to balance that because at tournaments you can get sports dings and then people playing their mates to boost their sport. Things like that can happen. So you have to be kind of sensible about how you do it. But that's not a new problem for events. But you can also have things like maybe not a full-on kind of painting score because, again, in a tournament where it's about the game and it is competitive, you might not necessarily want to be about the whole hobby, but you don't want unpainted models on the table. So a scoring system that is a very achievable, which results in good-looking armies without necessarily having to be top-level armies on the board, things like that. And you could, you could even then go towards kind of a composition score as well for the nature of an army. That becomes very subjective and can open up a whole can of worms as well. But there are things that can be done to kind of just control that aspect of it. And because, to be honest, even these people, I've met very few people like in the whole hobby, all my years of tournament gaming, that I really think need to like take a step back. Probably like 10, 12 over the whole course of how many years of gaming, moving aside kind of, personality differences, because you're always going to hit a few of them. There are a handful of people I've said to tournament organisers I don't want to play them, because I know that there's issues there. But in general, gamers are fine. We're still going away and paying whatever, 120 quid for flipping hotel room, 50 quid for a ticket, and then travel, and then food and everything else like that. So, we're not doing it to try and make money from winning tournaments.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and the last thing I think you could probably potentially look at, although this is really difficult, is an actual composition on the armies that so limits to what you can bring. Now, again, this is never perfect, and usually throws up some loopholes, but then some people perceive that a good gamer finds the loopholes and creates a list. Because if you're coming to an event, I've had people talk about bringing things which are counter the meta to my events, and that's very competitive terminology without necessarily being that way inclined.
Yeah.
So all those aspects of gaming, they're fun for a lot of people. They really are fun. People play chess because it's a challenge.
Yes, no, definitely. Yeah, and some people like the tactics and the real strategy that comes from playing a game as it is, and want to explore that to its absolutely, its nth degree.
I would say more people like the strategy than are given credit for. I certainly like tough games of Warhammer. Certainly in old Warhammer Fantasy Battles, I felt like I played the best when I didn't concentrate properly for the first turn or two and found myself up against it. Then I was like, okay, cool, I've got a challenge here. I've got a puzzle. I've got to try and work out how to get out of this, and I've got to, play my socks off to do it. And when I did do it and I got a win out of a game I should probably have lost, that's an awesome feeling, Did I have to act? Did my opponent have to, suffer because of that? No, I would actually say that happens at the narrative events as well. It feels great when you pull out a win from the jaws of defeat.
Completely.
So it's a strange position we've got ourselves into. I think because of the nature of the way it's portrayed, particularly online, particularly certain people. Not everyone is the same, but there is a small group where I think it's a detriment to the hobby, the way they talk about stuff. Not them, just the way they talk about stuff involved in the game, the way they talk about 40k players coming in and things like that. I think, to be honest, I'd rather it just stopped, because, I've met 40k players who put Heresy players to shame with how much narrative they can throw into a story,
Yes.
It's the nature of the beast. Like, people are people. Every game has its different levels. Yes, those people didn't go to tournaments because 40k tournaments were extremely competitive and probably too much so. But that's, so they're not seen as being around. They were there. Trust me, they were there. They still are there, in fact, and there's loads more coming back. So I think competitive as a term has almost got to lose this dirty association, because there's nothing wrong with it. It's a way of playing the game. I can name 5 or 6 people easily who thought about what list they were bringing to my latest event because they knew it would set them in good stead. And actually, people like Ben with his knights, that wasn't one of them. People always pick out people with knight lists. It wasn't him. He tried to make sure he had an army which was going to be relative to everything else. He underestimated how much people pulled back from the big toys, but fair play to him. He tried to make this list which worked, and yet a lot of people will look at that and say, "Oh, knights." And in fact, they did knights in that list. Ooh. And it becomes perception, and then when people are out there, oh, that's that bloke with that knight list. It's like, well, actually, really decent guy, had 5 great games. No one lost most of them. I think he lost 4, drew 1. Everyone had fun against him. So, and it can have an effect. It can have an effect on the way armies and people are perceived.
Oh yeah, completely.
And it's it's just not needed. At the end of the day, we're all in this hobby. This hobby is decent size, but it's not big enough that we can really be at each other's throats, because you'll end up meeting people and finding out actually you like this person, you keep having to go online, stuff like that. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens. I'm not going to be attending that event in November because I've got all these other events going on, and personally I don't think it's for me. And I personally think that's going to be the attitude of a lot of players, but it'll be interesting to see how many do jump on it.
Yeah, definitely.
And GW are going to continue with their open, and I suspect they're going to have a GT for it as well, whilst running their narrative events. Why not? If they keep getting people to play, then it shows there's a desire for it.
Yeah, I think if it's another outlet, I don't see a problem with it really. It's just a case of you choose what you want to do, and I think most people will probably end up maybe doing a bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, I could see myself going to a competitive event if it was the right situation, and I mean, I haven't fully looked at the pack for that one yet, so I don't know exactly what's going on, but I could see myself doing it. I certainly could see a couple of players from our club doing it and really enjoying it. So, there's anything that promotes more game playing is good. And this hobby is, multiple aspects to this hobby, from reading the books to, creating the miniatures. It's almost like having a go at someone for never converting a model,
Yeah.
Some people like to convert models, some people don't. And who's to say that they're right or wrong? I think GW's catchphrase now is, what is it? Our world's your game.
Yes.
And that's it. Just as long as everyone's having fun, and that's the thing, is to make sure you've got people and playing with expectations that are matching. And that is why my pack has that right at the start, to say to people, if you are competitive, if you are about winning, having control, because there are lots of gamers like that, then, this is not the event for you. Hopefully someone else puts on events for them, but we shall see.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else before we shoot off?
No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty much covered everything on competitive events. But if you've got any thoughts, anyone else got any thoughts about competitive events or anything like that, please drop us a line. Let us know.
Yeah, definitely. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. It's all good. It's all good. Look forward to hearing from you. We'll take a quick break. You've made it to the end of another show. Congratulations. There's not a lot to do, I don't think, in the close-up. Well, there's a few little things to do. Just a reminder, the charity auction for the Summoner model, as painted by Neil, finalist winner, pin.
Yes, finalist winner, yep.
Yep, so the link for that is going to be in the show notes for the eBay auction. And, we haven't finalised the details of that yet, but it will run for a couple of weeks or so.
So yeah, a couple of weeks it should be on for.
Do want to have a go at looking at that, please head over to eBay via the link, and we'll make sure it's got all the right tags on it on eBay as well, I'm sure. So that'll be good. We are going to have some more. In fact, while we're on the charity stuff, I do have the final amount for what we got, and it's £1,646 plus whatever we get from the summoner.
Brilliant, that's great.
I need to send that off to them this week. I will write a check out or what have you, get in touch with them. So that's really good. If you've got ideas, just say going forwards, essentially what raises the money is the cool raffles we did. So I've got a couple of little things, but if anyone's got any ideas for raising money, then let us know, because as I say, we're doing cancel one this time. And I want to keep going with it, but, giving 10% of the show is, it's cool, but it's not a huge amount of cash. So, and anything we can do around that to raise some more money will be pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone's got any cool suggestions that don't involve me having to paint a Primark,
and that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. We might as well mention again the night raffle. So the charity night raffle for Duchenne's. So you can find all the details out on the Vangarian Heresy, and go and find it on Facebook. And I think I put the link in the show notes last time. I'll try and do that again. $35 a shot to win one of 3 night households with 7 nights in them or whatever it is, all painted. It's not a bad thing. And nights aren't, well, if you want to play 40k with them, nights aren't quite the win or loss army that they were. Or are in Heresy.
Yes.
Which is good. Brilliant. Don't forget, we've got Patreon. So this is going to be revised. I am actually, by the time this is out, there will be a Patreon winner of a free session with Miles, which he's given to us as part of his sponsorship. So, if you haven't received an email, haven't had a look, or Patreon goes into your junk folder or whatever, just pop over there to see if you've won. It will be one chosen randomly from all the Patreon supporters. So thank you guys for that, and thanks Miles for offering that up. But we have actually got quite a few of these to give away, so we are going to give away one to a listener of the show. So Patreon members can enter this as well if they want. And wanted to keep it very simple. Didn't want to do it ability based or anything like that. So to enter, all you have to do is send an email to contest@theimperialtruth.com with your reasons why you should get the session. And it can be serious, it can be funny, it can be whatever. And I think we'll just pick our favourite. I think that's the way forward.
Easiest way, isn't it?
No, I won't even pick my favourite. It'll be... Yeah, we'll do favourite. I was thinking we'd do it at random, but people won't even bother to answer them.
Yeah.
We'll pick
I
our
want
favourite.
it because I need it.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to be the worst painter or the best painter to get this, but you have to just kind of intrigue us as to why you should get it. Rewards for effort rather than ability in the writing as well. So that's cool. And then, of course, just a reminder, the tickets are up on Element Games for the event in Stockport for First Blood, and very soon, if not already, the tickets for Blood and Glory will be up as well in Derby the first weekend of November, with everything that's going on with that, feverishly writing packs at the moment, trying to get that done. But it'd be really cool to get a good crowd for each of them. It should be a blast, both those weekends. But that's...
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And that's about all I got. So, feedback on the show, bits you like, bits you don't like, questions for Neil, questions for me. You've got...
Any ideas?
Any ideas, anyone with any ideas. Check out, email greg@theimperialtruth.com.
You can email me on neil@theimperialtruth.com.
And you can get me on Twitter @childofang or @imperial_truth.
You can get me on at Neil Paints on Twitter and Instagram, and www.neilpaints.com.
Oh yes, you've got a blog. Do talk.
I started a blog. Yes. Well, it was weird because I was basically sitting there thinking, I love Instagram because it's brilliant for just taking a photo and bagging it up there, but you just get a load of likes and then it disappears off the face of the earth.
Yep.
And similarly with Twitter, however, Twitter is I find Twitter quite frustrating because it's quite constrained with the number of, I'm busy typing something away on Twitter and then go, oh, I've run out of characters. So I always get quite frustrated with Twitter. And then I thought to myself, I'd rather be able to sort of put some pictures up and have a decent amount of text with how I paint things and, really go into detail about what I've done. And I thought, I'll just create a blog. So I registered a blog and stuck it out there for people to hopefully enjoy.
Yeah, awesome. So, fingers crossed you'll remember to update it regularly.
I'm going to try and keep all three updated now. I'm going to try and make sure I do bits on Twitter now and then. I'm not a big Twitter person anymore, but still plenty on Instagram. And then there'll be pretty much everything that's on Instagram, if it's a decent quality, will be put onto the blog, but with much more elaborate description and more angles, etc.
More detail, yeah, brilliant. Excellent stuff. And also the feed hopefully will be up, or very soon will be up, for Fanatic, which is my other podcast that I did mention at the start of the show, didn't I? I'm trying to remember. Which is a generic GW hobby fan podcast. So if you if you can put up with listening to me, which if you've made it this far, you probably can, then hopefully Fanatic's going to be a cool little side project once a month, plus hopefully some additional content, just talking about all kinds of other games. Probably going to leave all the Heresy to this, certainly 90% of it to this show. We'll talk about all the other IP over there, fingers crossed, depending on getting people involved with it. And hopefully that will take off. But that's about all.
Excellent.
I think we're done. And
we are.
We'll come back, I'm sure, in a couple of weeks with some awesome topics, some amazing little tidbits. Neil wants more how-to suggestions.
I do.
So email them to him. And,
how to create a blog.
Well, easy, Tiger. 2 posts a blog does not make. I think we can all do that. So, on that note, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.